in Cottonwood Heights, Utah, at 11:47 p.m. A call was secretly recorded. During that conversation, Jennifer confessed to her lover that she had killed her husband, Matthew. From that moment on, the truth about a seemingly perfect marriage began to emerge, leading to one of the most shocking family crimes in Utah. Jennifer Gledhill and Matthew Johnson seemed to have it all. Living in their million-dollar home in Cottonwood Heights, Utah, they appeared to be the perfect family, a devoted military husband and a caring mother, raising their 3 children, aged 11, 7, and 5. Matthew, 51, was a respected member of the Utah National Guard's 19th Special Forces Group. Known for his reliability and brilliance, his fellow soldiers said he was the kind of man they could always count on for answers. Jennifer, 42, was seen as a devoted mother and supportive military wife, whom many of Matthew's friends described as nice and rather reclusive, but beneath the surface, their marriage had begun to fracture months earlier. In August 2024, Jennifer filed for a temporary protective order against Matthew, claiming she needed protection from him. Yet, when the case reached 3rd District Commissioner Russell Minus, he dismissed the request. The commissioner noted that text messages from Jennifer to Matthew were repeatedly berating, belittling, and demeaning, if not outright attempts, to goad him into a violent response on the 16th of September, 2024, just days before the tragedy that would shatter their family forever. Commissioner Minus dismissed the protective order, ruling that no abuse had occurred. In the weeks leading up to September, Matthew's friends noticed changes. Jennifer's behavior had become so erratic that Matthew sometimes stayed overnight at a National Guard facility, telling those close to him that he feared for his safety. In one of his final conversations with a longtime friend, retired Guardsman Kevin Thompson, Matthew said he was ready to move on and file for divorce. Behind his back, Jennifer was living a double life. She was deeply involved in an affair with another man, an affair so intense that it consumed her thoughts. On the 19th of September, just days before Matthew's death, Jennifer showed her lover a loaded Glock 19X she kept in the home. At the time, he brushed it off. Firearms weren't unusual in a military family, but prosecutors later argued this was part of a calculated plan. She had arranged for their 3 children to stay at her parents' house the night she planned to kill Matthew. The stage was being set for a confrontation that would end in tragedy. The 20th of September, 2024, began like any other day. But by evening, the fragile facade of the marriage would finally crumble. Matthew had discovered the truth about his wife's affair, and witnesses would later report hearing a heated argument between the couple that night. According to Jennifer's later confession, Matthew confronted her, yelling because he knew she had been sleeping with someone else. The argument was intense, years of marital problems finally exploding into the open. What happened next would haunt everyone who learned about it. In the early hours of the 21st of September, 2024, as Matthew lay sleeping in their master bedroom, completely vulnerable and unaware of the danger, Jennifer made a decision that would destroy him forever. She took his own 9mm handgun and shot him in the head while he slept. By her own confession, she then put Matthew's body into a rooftop storage container, sliding it down the stairs of their home before loading it into the back of their minivan. She smashed his phone and drove his truck to a nearby neighborhood, abandoning it blocks from their home. Then, in what can only be described as a methodical cover-up, Jennifer drove north with her husband's body and buried him in a shallow grave at a location that remains unknown to this day. When she returned home, she began an extensive cleanup operation. She bleached the walls, used carpet cleaning supplies throughout the master bedroom, and ordered a new mattress to replace the blood-soaked one where Matthew had been killed. The mattress arrived just 2 days later, but Jennifer's most critical mistake was yet to come. On the 22nd of September, just before midnight, Jennifer showed up at her lover's home and made a confession that would ultimately lead to her arrest. She told him everything: how she had killed Matthew, how she had disposed of his body, and how she had cleaned up the crime scene. The man noticed bruises on Jennifer's body during their conversation, and when he asked about them, she casually explained that she had gotten them while burying her husband and cleaning the house of evidence. Her lover was terrified by what he had heard. Jennifer, whom he thought he knew, had just confessed to cold-blooded murder with an almost casual demeanor. The truth was about to come out, and it was worse than anyone imagined. Jennifer's lover was so disturbed by her confession that he decided to record their next phone conversation. When he told Jennifer that he was frightened by what she had told him, her response was chilling and would become one of the most haunting pieces of evidence in the case. She exclaimed that she thinks she could even hurt a fly, and said that Matthew's not a person. He wasn't a person anymore. The cold detachment in her voice was unmistakable. She had dehumanized her husband so completely that his death meant nothing to her. But Jennifer's disturbing revelations didn't stop there. When her lover asked if she would do anything differently if she could turn back time, Jennifer replied, no. She also asked her lover not to think of her as a monster and to remember who she was before the confession. The irony was not lost. She was asking for understanding after confessing to murdering the father of her children in cold blood. What made this conversation even more significant was that it took place before Matthew was officially reported missing. Jennifer was already referring to her husband in the past tense. Even though no one else knew he was dead, 6 days after confessing to her lover, Jennifer finally reported Matthew missing to the police. She told them that Matthew had said he would be gone for a week and instructed her not to call him. Meanwhile, the Utah National Guard had already begun searching for Matthew when he failed to report for duty on the 23rd of September. Unbeknownst to Jennifer, her lover had been collecting evidence against her, including screenshots of their text messages and recordings of their phone conversations. On the 2nd of October, 2024, he contacted the police with information that would crack the case wide open. On the 2nd of October, 2024, armed with the recorded confessions and physical evidence, police arrested Jennifer Gledhill on charges of first-degree murder and obstruction of justice. When Cottonwood Heights, Utah police executed a search warrant on the Gledhill home. They discovered a scene that told a very different story than the one Jennifer had presented. In the master bedroom, investigators found a large blood-stained spot on the carpet beneath the bed. Blood was also found on the bed frame slats, which corroborated Jennifer's confession to her lover. The house reeked of bleach, and there were reddish-brown stains on the walls, bed frame, and blinds. Tellingly, the mattress in the bedroom was brand new. Phone records later revealed that Jennifer had ordered it on the 24th of September, just 3 days after the murder. It had been delivered 2 days later. During the investigation, police also discovered GPS data from Jennifer's phone showing her movements on the 21st of September and 22nd. The data showed her traveling to the location where Matthew's truck was found at around 6 o'clock a.m., and later tracking her journey north toward Davis County, exactly where she claimed to have buried his body. But the investigation was far from over. On the 24th of October, 2024, Jennifer's parents, Thomas Gledhill, 71, and Rosalie Gledhill, 68, were also arrested and charged with 4 counts of obstruction of justice. Police discovered that they had spent over 5 hours at Jennifer's house in late September. Despite initially claiming they were only there for less than an hour to pick up clothing, investigators found that Rosalie had purchased the new mattress and had her phone remotely reset, erasing all data about her whereabouts during the cleanup period. When police questioned Thomas about the master bedroom and the alleged cleanup, he said he did not go in where the incident happened, inadvertently revealing knowledge of a crime scene. During a search of Jennifer's parents' home, police found a Glock 19X gun box wrapped in a child's onesie inside a plastic tote near Jennifer's bedroom. The container matched the description of the gun Jennifer had shown to her lover on the 19th of September. The family had tried to cover up the perfect murder, but their web of lies was quickly unraveling. Months have passed since Jennifer's arrest, but Matthew Johnson's body remains missing. Extensive search efforts have covered multiple counties, extending from Davis counties all the way to Box Elder County near the Utah border. Over 70 searchers have participated in the ongoing efforts to find Matthew, including law enforcement, volunteers, and Matthew's own military friends who have organized their own search parties. As his friend Kevin Thompson said, the fact that the search is now in its 5th month keeps them up at night. John Hash, Matthew's fellow Green Beret, who served with him for 12 years, has been frustrated by the ongoing search efforts. He said, having had Jennifer in his home before, breaking bread with them, it turned out she's responsible for Matthew's death. It was shocking. Frankly, during recent court hearings, prosecutors revealed that a vehicle storage container had been found floating in water and it contained Matthew's blood inside. This discovery provided additional physical evidence linking Jennifer to the crime, but Matthew's body still hasn't been recovered. The search continues to expand across northern Utah as investigators follow every lead, hoping to finally bring Matthew home to his family. They were about to discover a secret Jennifer had hoped would never see the light of day. Jennifer Gledhill has pleaded not guilty to all charges against her. She faces 1 count of first-degree murder, 5 counts of obstruction of justice, 1 count of possession of a controlled substance, 1 count of abuse or desecration of a human body, and 1 count of tampering with a witness. During her bail hearing, prosecutors argued that Jennifer posed a significant danger to the community and to the integrity of the investigation. They revealed that she had told her lover she would shoot herself rather than go to jail, demonstrating both her desperation and potential for further violence. The judge sided with the prosecutors and denied Jennifer's request for bail, noting the risk she posed to the community. She remains in custody at the Salt Lake County Jail. Adding another layer of complexity to the case is the matter of Matthew's $500,000 Prudential life insurance policy, with Jennifer named as the beneficiary. Because Jennifer is facing murder charges and Matthew's body is still missing, Prudential has asked the court to determine who should receive the money. Jennifer's trial is scheduled to begin on the 8th of December, 2025, and is expected to last 8 days. Perhaps the most heartbreaking aspect of this case is the plight of the 3 children who have lost both parents, 1 to murder and 1 to imprisonment. Matthew Johnson's family has released a statement through their victim representative saying they are hopeful that they will find Matthew soon, or that Jennifer or someone will come forward with the location of his body so they can properly lay him to rest. The prosecution's theory is straightforward but chilling. Jennifer Gledhill killed her husband because he discovered her affair, and she wanted to be free to pursue her relationship with her lover rather than go through a messy divorce that might have resulted in shared custody and financial obligations. She chose murder. As we await Jennifer Gledhill's trial in December 2025, one question haunts everyone involved in this case. How does a mother of 3 justify destroying so many lives for the sake of an affair? Perhaps we'll never fully understand the depths of her selfishness and cruelty. What we do know is that her actions have created wounds that will never fully heal. Justice may eventually be served, but Matthew Johnson will never come home to his children, and somewhere in northern Utah, a devoted father and soldier lies in an unmarked grave, waiting for someone to finally tell the truth about where he can be found. Behind the smile and attractive appearance, sometimes there are hidden corners that no one can imagine. When the truth is revealed, it is too late to save everything. On a quiet March morning in 2018, the suburban calm of Ajax, Ontario, was shattered by a crime so brutal that it left an entire community reeling. Within hours, 3 lives were extinguished, 1 family was destroyed, leaving behind painful questions about love, jealousy, and the warning signs that had gone unheeded. On March 13, 2018, Vanellia Pejcinovski was eagerly anticipating the evening. School was breaking for spring vacation. The 13-year-old girl had an entire week of rest and enjoyment ahead of her. She lived with her family in Ajax, a fairly large city in the province of Ontario, Canada. Vanellia and her family ones resided in a modest house that was divided into several separate apartments. She had an older sister, 16-year-old Victoria Pejcinovski, and an older brother named Roy Pejcinovski, who was 15. All 3 siblings were raised by their mother, Krasimira Pejcinovski. The children's biological father, Herleene, had divorced Krasimira a few years earlier, yet they remained on good terms. Herleene was very active in his children's lives, and they saw him regularly, often staying overnight at his place. He spent most of his time with his son Roy, while Vanellia and Victoria primarily lived with their mother. Victoria, the eldest daughter, was enrolled in driving school. She practiced driving in her spare time and also worked part-time at a local beauty salon. Krasimira was employed there as well and helped both daughters get small jobs at the salon. Krasimira herself was well known and well liked, becoming close friends with the owner and many colleagues, so much so that the salon felt like a second home to her. Roy, meanwhile, was in the middle of hockey season and played for his school team. He was a talented young player. His coach firmly believed he had a bright athletic future. At that time, 39-year-old Krasimira was dating a 29-year-old man named Corey Fenn, who had 2 children from a previous relationship. Their relationship had lasted for a little more than a year, having begun when they met at a local gym in late 2016. The casual conversation soon turned into something much more. Krasimira and Corey were quickly drawn to each other and began dating. The relationship developed rapidly, and in the spring of 2017, they decided to live together. Corey moved in, began renting a basement room in Krasimira's house. From then on, Krasimira spent more and more of her time with him, often staying overnight in his room. This situation gave the children greater independence, and even though their mother was nearby, they were for the most part left unsupervised. March 13, 2018, proved to be a busy day for the entire family. That evening, Roy came home after playing in a hockey game, which was attended by both parents and his younger sister. Vanellia had invited one of her closest friends, Sylvia, to stay for a sleepover, and Krasimira agreed. The day went on in an ordinary fashion. After Roy's game, Krasimira returned home and soon went downstairs to be with Corey. The 2 teenage girls entertained themselves, recording short videos, watching movies, ordering pizza, finally going to bed late that night at around 10:30 a.m. On March 14, 2018, Sylvia was awakened by the constant vibration of Vanellia's mobile phone. Wanting to keep sleeping, she tried to ignore it, but after a while, she could no longer tolerate the sound. She attempted to wake her friend, but was unsuccessful. Looking at the screen, Sylvia saw numerous missed calls and messages. Thinking it might be urgent, she finally managed to rouse Vanellia. It turned out that Victoria had been calling throughout the morning. Their mother was supposed to pick her up after a driving lesson, but she had not answered the phone. So she asked Vanellia to go find their mother and remind her to leave. Vanellia left the room, while Sylvia stayed in bed. distracted by her own phone. At 11 o'clock a woman entered the room where Sylvia was staying. She was a police officer who told Sylvia that she needed to leave the house immediately. Sylvia was instructed to move quickly and not to look around while passing through the lower rooms. Confused and frightened, she instantly realized that something terrible must have happened inside the house. Once outside, she noticed Sherry Robinson, the owner of the beauty salon where Krasimira and Vanelia worked. Over the years, Sherry and Krasimira had become best friends, and Sherry was well aware of many personal details of Krasimira's life. Seeing Sherry there only deepened Sylvia's worry. Sherry was talking with police officers and answering their questions. According to Sherry, her shop always maintains a unique atmosphere not only for customers, but also for employees. This contributed positively to business, but it required all employees to follow certain standards, such as always looking polished and maintaining warm communication. For years, Krasimira excelled at this. But in the months leading up to that day, Sherry noticed a troubling change. Krasimira had grown withdrawn, spoke less, and appeared tense, an absolute transformation of character. She began taking more sick days, arrived late to work, and her once strong physical condition declined. As though she had stopped going to the gym, she looked sleep-deprived, overloaded, and constantly exhausted, perhaps even ill. Her outward appearance reflected this shift. Krasimira had lost a striking amount of weight. Instead of her usual stylish and elegant outfits, she now wore loose-fitting clothes that did not suit her. She had also stopped applying makeup, only putting on a minimal amount before work so she could look presentable for clients. At home, she no longer bothered with her appearance at all. Sherry grew worried about these changes and eventually had a heartfelt conversation with her friend. Krasimira confided that her boyfriend, Corey Fenn, often pressured her to go to parties where they drank excessively. Later, she even admitted that Corey had tried to get her addicted to banned substance. Sherry doesn't believe everything Krasimira says and thinks that the real problem isn't the parties, but their relationship itself. While the first few months of their romance resembled a typical honeymoon phase, things began to deteriorate drastically after Corey moved into Krasimira's home with his children. When Sherry first met Corey, she had mixed impressions. On one hand, he was muscular, attractive, and outwardly confident. On the other, his insecurity revealed itself in manipulative behavior. He accused Krasimira of infidelity, grew jealous of anyone she interacted with, and demanded constant updates about all her contacts. Soon, he insisted that she stop wearing makeup and dress in unflattering clothes, supposedly to deter unwanted male attention. Even though Krasimira reluctantly complied with these unreasonable demands, his jealousy persisted. Sherry realized the extent of Corey's control when Krasimira admitted she could no longer provide manicures for male clients. In his mind, the simple act of touching another person always implied something more. Their relationship seemed increasingly unstable, and Sherry recognized it clearly. One day, Sherry noticed injuries on Krasimira and soon learned that Corey had caused them. It became apparent that he was quick to anger whenever he failed to get his way. Any attempt by Krasimira to assert her boundaries provoked him, and he would lash out physically. In one confrontation, he slammed her against a wall with such force that the phone in her pocket broke. Alarmed by these revelations, Sherry tried to help her friend, repeatedly urging her to open up and insisting it was time to end the relationship. Unfortunately, Krasimira was hesitant and felt she needed more time before making such a decision. By February, Krasimira arrived at work in high spirits, happily announcing that Corey was finally moving out. The breakup had come after she discovered his infidelity. Given his constant and irrational jealousy, everyone at the salon was relieved to hear that Krasimira had ended the relationship. Still, some colleagues remained skeptical, as they had already broken up and reconciled multiple times before. And indeed, by the beginning of March, Corey had returned to the basement apartment, which had been converted into a separate living space. He promised Krasimira that he would change and that their life together would be different. Despite having regretted her forgiveness many times in the past, Krasimira once again allowed him back into her home. A week after their reconciliation, on the morning of March 14, Krasimira was scheduled to start work at 10 o'clock a.m. However, she never showed up. Her colleagues at the beauty salon, including Sherry Robinson, immediately became worried, especially after repeated phone calls to her went unanswered. They then tried to call Krasimira's oldest daughter, Victoria. Victoria is not at home right now. She contacted Vanelia and asked her to find their mother. Sherry developed a sinking feeling that something was terribly wrong. So she decided to drive to Krasimira's house, which was about 10 minutes away from the salon. Sherry arrived at around 10:45 a.m. Just minutes after Vanelia had gone downstairs to look for her mother. Despite Sherry's repeated ringing and knocking, no one answered the door. A few minutes later, Corey Fenn emerged from the basement. His unit had its own separate entrance. Corey brushed past Sherry as though nothing unusual had happened. When she asked where Krasimira was, he told her that Krasimira was sick and wouldn't be coming to work that day. Sherry was far from convinced and pressed him for more information. But Corey refused to let her inside. He insisted that Krasimira had drunk too much the night before and was merely sleeping it off. Sherry, sensing something was terribly wrong, refused to accept his explanation. During the exchange, she noticed Corey's suspicious demeanor. He was shirtless, breathing heavily, and drenched in sweat. On closer inspection, Sherry saw several dark red stains on his body that looked very much like blood. Still, Corey continued to insist that Krasimira was fine and did not allow Sherry into the basement. Eventually, Sherry pretended to accept his explanation, saying she would head back to the salon. Corey seemed to relax and even promised that Krasimira would call as soon as she felt better. Sherry got into her car and pretended to leave, but after driving only about 100 meters, she stopped and called 911. She explained her concerns to the dispatcher and requested a welfare check. While she was still on the phone, watching in her rearview mirror, she saw Corey walk out of the house, get into his pickup truck, and drive away. Summoning her courage, Sherry returned to the house. To her surprise, the front door was ajar. She stepped inside and called out for Krasimira, but received no reply. Though she wanted to check the rooms, a strong sense of dread convinced her to retreat outside and wait for the police. Her instincts proved tragically correct. Within minutes, officers arrived and began searching Corey's basement apartment. Inside, they witnessed a horrifying scene. The first discovery was the body of Krasimira's 15-year-old son, Roy, lying on the floor, wedged between the headboard and the wall. The room was in disarray, with bedding and clothing strewn about, some of it tied together into a large bundle, with a blanket. The second discovery was 13-year-old Vanelia, who had also been brutally attacked. Unlike her brother, she had not been strangled, but she had suffered multiple stab wounds. Miraculously, she was still alive and was rushed to a nearby hospital. Krasimira herself was nowhere to be found in the basement, so the search continued. It was not until around 2:00 p.m. that her body was finally located. She had been hidden in the garage, naked and concealed beneath a pile of old tires, garbage, and cardboard boxes. The injuries showed that she had been brutally beaten, stabbed multiple times, and had obvious strangulation marks on her neck. The sheer brutality of the attack was later confirmed during the coroner's examination. Krasimira alone had sustained 17 broken bones. In addition to the many stab wounds, she had multiple broken ribs, fractures, to her facial bones, shattered upper and lower jaws. The other victims showed similarly extensive trauma. The knife used to kill Krasimira was found near her body in the garage, while another kitchen knife had been used to stab Vanelia. The violence was so extreme that the victims were left almost unrecognizable. Most of the injuries were concentrated on the head, neck, and chest. All three victims bore defensive wounds, but tragically, none had the strength to withstand Corey's assault. From the very beginning, Corey Fenn was the detective's primary suspect. The police quickly gathered statements from Victoria, Sylvia, and Sherry. Their accounts left little room for doubt about Corey's involvement in the attack. The problem, however, is that Corey has run away, giving him a dangerous head start. After fleeing in his pickup truck, Corey drove northwest into a neighboring town where he abandoned the vehicle. From there, he walked to a nearby gas station, called for a taxi, and continued on his way. He left his cell phone inside the truck to mislead investigators. Yet he made a critical error by going directly to the home of his ex-wife and children. Naturally, the police identified that location as one of the first places to search, and their instincts proved correct. Corey was discovered hiding in the attic. When officers attempted to arrest Corey, he resisted fiercely, lashing out at several policemen. A stun gun was used to subdue him, and due to injuries sustained in the struggle, he was taken to a hospital before being transferred to the police station. Inside the attic, investigators found a gym bag that Corey had been carrying. The bag contained a significant quantity of illegal banned substance, scales, packaging materials, and roughly $4,000 in cash. This evidence strongly indicated that Corey was not only a user, but also actively involved in distribution. Additional personal items, including vodka, bodybuilding supplements, and anabolic steroids, were also recovered. Meanwhile, 13-year-old Vanelia Pejcinovski was fighting desperately for her life at the hospital. Doctors worked tirelessly for hours to stabilize her, but the damage was too severe. That evening, she succumbed to her injuries. Her older sister, Victoria, who had rushed to the hospital upon learning of the attack, stayed by her side until the very end. Vanelia died in her sister's arms. During interrogation, Corey almost immediately confessed to killing 3 people, fleeing the scene, attempting to conceal evidence, and resisting arrest. However, he sought to lessen his responsibility by claiming the murders were the product of banned, substance-induced psychosis. According to his version, in the days before the killings, he had been using banned substance heavily and slipped into a deranged, uncontrollable state. He insisted he was plagued by paranoid delusions and auditory hallucinations, which supposedly drove him to attack Krasimira and her children. Yet, as questioning continued, glaring inconsistencies emerged in Corey's account. His claims of psychosis appeared to be nothing more than a fabricated excuse to mask uncontrolled rage and jealousy. At times, he pretended to have no memory of key details. At other times, he recounted events with remarkable precision. When pressed about these contradictions, Corey stated that he simply did not want to relive the events in his mind because he would be haunted by the trauma for the rest of his life. Despite having brutally murdered 3 people, he attempted to paint himself as the victim. Later, his story shifted again. Corey now attempted to cast blame on Krasimira herself. He alleged that when she drank alcohol, she became paranoid and suspicious, accusing him of cheating and even searching the apartment for other women. He claimed that this was exactly what had occurred in the early morning hours of March 14, with Krasimira screaming and behaving irrationally. That this supposedly provoked his attack. Investigators carefully examined Corey's narrative and considered whether banned substance use and alcohol might have influenced his behavior, but this theory quickly collapsed. Toxicology reports showed that Krasimira and Corey did not use any of those substances. Contrary to his testimony, his claim that she provoked him through drunkenness was therefore baseless. Moreover, no explanation could justify the sheer level of violence inflicted in the triple homicide. The psychosis defense grew even weaker after police interviewed others who had interacted with Corey on March 14, including his ex-girlfriend. They all described him as calm, coherent, and showing no outward signs of drug intoxication. Corey's actions appeared deliberate and methodical. This was clear from his efforts to clean the apartment after the murders and from the way he tried to chase Sherry away from the house. Corey Fenn even deleted all the data from his cell phone and abandoned his pickup truck with the phone still inside, deliberately attempting to mislead investigators. His rational mindset was also evident when he specifically asked about Victoria through Sylvia. He showed no concern for Krasimira's friend. His focus was solely on members of the Pejcinovski family. This selectivity strongly suggested that he was not impaired by banned substance or alcohol and that he was fully aware of his actions. Detectives concluded that the crime bore all the hallmarks of planning and premeditation. When investigators interviewed Victoria, the surviving daughter, she provided critical insight into Corey's behavior. She explained that on March 13, she had not initially intended to spend the night at her father's house. While searching for something at home earlier that day, she had stumbled upon a large bag filled with illegal banned substance. Disturbed, she confronted her mother, warning that if Corey continued to keep such substances in the house, she would report it to the police. Outraged by the discovery, Krasimira assured her daughter that she was ending the relationship for good. She planned to order Corey out of the basement apartment and never let him return. Still shaken by what had happened, Victoria chose to stay at her father's place that evening, not wanting to be present for another inevitable confrontation. Detectives came to believe that the outbreak of violence most likely occurred after Krasimira confronted Corey. She may have mentioned both the discovery of the banned substance and the threat of going to the authorities, which escalated the situation. It became clear why Corey had later been searching for Victoria inside the house. He saw her as the person most likely to expose his criminal activities. Silencing her would have protected him, and the only reason she survived was because she happened to be elsewhere that night. According to the reconstruction of events, the triple homicide did not unfold all at once, but stretched over nearly 5 hours. After killing Krasimira and hiding her body in the garage, Corey attempted to tidy up the basement before going in search of Victoria. Instead, he encountered Roy. Corey strangled Roy into unconsciousness and then beat him to death. Hours later, Venelia, who had been upstairs with her friend Sylvia, came downstairs looking for her mother, a fatal mistake that sealed her fate. With Victoria's testimony in hand, police were confident they had a solid case for premeditation. Corey Fenn was charged with 3 counts of second-degree murder. The trial itself proved long and complicated, partly because of the global issue and partly due to Corey's own actions. He dismissed his lawyer, then declared he would represent himself. The court assigned standby counsel, but Corey continually obstructed the lawyer's efforts. The attorney believed Corey should plead guilty to the triple murder while emphasizing mitigating factors such as substance abuse. Corey, however, insisted this was a mistake and clung to the argument that banned, substance-induced psychosis absolved him of responsibility. During the proceedings, not a single witness was called for the defense. Corey's self-representation amounted to little more than a repetitive recital of the same excuses. The situation grew even more surreal when he announced in court that he now had God inside him. He claimed that after completing a rehabilitation program at the Toronto South Detention Centre, he had rethought his actions and reformed. To observers, this came across as delusion rather than a genuine legal defense. It appeared Corey was attempting to convince the court of his insanity, but his strategy failed completely. In February 2022, Corey Fenn 33, was found guilty of murdering Krasimira, Roy, and Vanelia Pejcinovski. His sentencing hearing took place 2 months later. By then, his courtroom behavior had grown even more erratic. He continued to insist that the God within him had cleansed him, and he even announced plans to file a civil lawsuit against the state for alleged mistreatment. His repeated interruptions eventually led to his removal from the courtroom, after which he was forced to watch the proceedings remotely. In Canada, a conviction for second-degree murder carries a mandatory life sentence with the possibility of parole after at least 10 years. These parole ineligibility periods can be ordered to run either concurrently or consecutively. In this case, the Crown argued for consecutive sentences, which would effectively ensure that Corey Fenn would spend the rest of his life behind bars. However, just prior to his trial, the Supreme Court of Canada ruled that consecutive parole ineligibility periods constitute cruel and unconstitutional punishment. Even so, considering the extreme brutality of the crimes and Corey's utter lack of remorse, it was clear that he would almost certainly never walk free again. Ultimately, Corey Fenn was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole for 25 years for the murder of Krasimira Pejcinovski, Vanelia Pejcinovski, and Roy Pejcinovski. The murders devastated everyone connected to the Pejcinovski family. Krasimira's father recounted that he was bedridden for days, lost in grief, constantly reliving nightmares of what had happened. Vanelia's close friend also struggled deeply, tormented by memories of that morning. Sherry Robinson, who had bravely insisted on checking the house, admitted that she often questioned whether she could have done more to save them. But the heaviest burden fell on Victoria, Krasimira's surviving daughter. She carries a profound sense of guilt, convinced that if she had been home that night, she might have been able to protect her mother and siblings. Yet those around her believe otherwise, that had she been present, she too would have become one of Corey Fenn's victims. On a quiet morning in late August 2024, the coastal city of Praia Grande awoke to a crime so brutal that it shocked the entire country. Neighbors heard yelling and crashing sounds, followed by silence. When police entered the apartment, they found chaos, blood on the floor, broken glass scattered across the rooms. The victim was Igor Peretto, a young and widely admired businessman. He was found dead in his sister's apartment, his body bearing dozens of stab wounds. But what truly shocked was not just the brutality of the act, but the identity of the suspects, the very people Igor trusted the most. How could love, loyalty, and family ties turn to betrayal and murder? And what hidden motives lie beneath this web of passion, jealousy, and ambition? Igor Peretto was born on May 17, 1997, in the state of Sao Paulo, southeastern Brazil. From the very beginning, his life unfolded within a large and complex family. His father had relationships with different partners over the years, which gave Igor many siblings. Growing up in this unconventional environment shaped his personality, giving him resilience and a sharp awareness of the world around him. Among all these family ties, one bond stood out: the close connection he shared with his younger sister, Marceli Peretto. As a boy, Igor was both determined and restless. He was ambitious, eager to take on challenges, so business quickly became his calling. With a natural ability to recognize opportunities, he never hesitated to take risks to build something of his own. These qualities earned him respect in his community and gradually established him as a rising figure in the business circles of Praia Grande, a coastal city. While his professional life advanced with momentum, his personal life was not always as stable. He had a distant relationship with a child from a previous romance that ended without lasting commitment. Then, toward the end of 2018, everything seemed to change when he met a young woman who embodied everything he had ever dreamed of. Rafaela Costa, a year younger than him. To Igor, she was striking not only for her beauty, but also for her determination, a trait he found magnetic. Rafaela also longed to start a family, and this shared desire created an immediate deep bond between them. Their relationship moved quickly. In June 2019, they welcomed their first child together, a moment that marked a turning point for Igor. Family became his anchor, the foundation of his values, and the source of his deepest pride. He didn't keep this love hidden. On social media, he openly expressed admiration for Rafaela and affection for his children, making it clear to everyone how much they meant to him. By 2022, at just 25 years old, Igor had already launched his first business, a car dealership. As the company grew, so did his ambitions. Soon after, he established a marketing firm and later expanded his automotive ventures by opening a second branch dedicated exclusively to motorcycles. This new project was built in partnership with Mario Vitorino da Silva, his brother-in-law and best friend. Mario, who was married to Marceli, shared with Igor not only the long days of hard work, but also leisure time, family moments, and a sense of loyalty that seemed unshakable. Igor was usually selective in his relationships, cautious about who he allowed into his inner circle. With Mario, however, he let his guard down. Their friendship deepened quickly, marked by trust and brotherhood. A similar closeness developed between Rafaela and Marceli. More than sisters-in-law, they became true friends, supporting one another, building a connection grounded in honesty and complicity. In time, Igor decided to take the next step with Rafaela. He proposed, she accepted, and for a moment, their lives seemed perfectly aligned. But the wedding never came. Instead, their relationship began to weaken. Rafaela then described how alcohol became a destructive agent in Igor's behavior. Under its influence, he grew jealous, controlling, and verbally aggressive. Although he never physically assaulted her, there was one night at a bar when his temper escalated into a fight that resulted in criminal charges. The case left a mark on his record, though it had no lasting legal consequences. As the years went by, challenges continued to test Igor and Mario. Both men became targets of an investigation for alleged money laundering. Though they were eventually acquitted, the case fueled gossip and suspicion in their community, leaving an uncomfortable cloud over their reputations. On July 24, 2024, Rafaela made a painful choice. She decided to separate from Igor. At first, he resisted the idea, unwilling to let go, but eventually he respected her decision and moved temporarily into another apartment he owned. During this time apart, Igor devoted himself to change. Convinced that he could win Rafaela back if he transformed himself, he began adopting healthier habits, lost weight. Most importantly, gave up alcohol and other substances that had once fueled his temper. For nearly a month, he worked not only to rebuild his body, but also to regain his self-control. His efforts seemed to pay off. By the end of August, Rafaela agreed to give their relationship another chance, and Igor returned home. For a brief moment, it looked as though life was back on track, but the peace didn't last. The reconciliation collapsed almost as quickly as it had begun. Just weeks after moving back in, Igor and Rafaela separated once more. It was in this fragile context that the fateful night of Friday, the 30th of August, 2024, unfolded. That afternoon, Igor dropped off his children at his mother's house, promising to return later to spend the night. Free of responsibilities, he joined his brother-in-law Mario at a party hosted by one of his brothers. It was an annual tradition, made even livelier that year by the celebration of their favorite football team's victory for both Igor and Mario. It was also a welcome distraction from their fractured personal lives. Igor wasn't the only one suffering. Mario, too, had been separated from Marcelli for months. Though their divorce wasn't finalized, that same evening, in another part of the city, Raffaella and Marcelli went out together. After dinner and drinks at a restaurant, they decided to head to the very same party. Despite knowing that their partners would be there, their intention was simply to see friends and enjoy the night. Inside, the atmosphere grew tense. The women stayed on one side, the men on the other. Words weren't exchanged, but glances occasionally crossed the room, thick with unspoken emotion. As dawn approached, Raffaella and Marcelli left together. They got into Raffaella's car. She drove her friend back to the apartment where Marcelli was staying. Moments later, Igor and Mario also left the party. Igor tried to request a ride through a taxi app, but Mario insisted on giving him a lift. That decision would change everything. At daybreak on Saturday, August 31, 2024, the quiet of a Praia Grande neighborhood was shattered. Disturbances were reported from an apartment building. The manager, alarmed by loud noises, rang the bell several times. When no one answered, she called the police. Officers arrived swiftly, but their knocks also went unanswered. With the help of a locksmith, they forced the door open. Inside, the scene was chilling. Bloodstains stretched across the kitchen, living room, and dining area. Leading deeper into the apartment, furniture was overturned. Following the trail, officers reached a bedroom where the horror was complete. On the floor lay the body of a young man. It was Igor, just 27 years old. A toppled wardrobe with mirrored doors lay across him, its glass shattered into razor-sharp fragments scattered around the room. In the bathroom, investigators found a bloodied kitchen knife taken from a drawer. The apartment belonged to Marcelli, and the victim was her brother. No other person was found inside, but the crime scene itself spoke volumes. The level of violence was extreme, suggesting from the very beginning that this case would become one of the most publicized in Brazil. And in the days that followed, the details that emerged only deepened the shock. Forensic experts confirmed that Igor was killed right where his body was found. He had suffered multiple blunt force injuries and at least 40 stab wounds, concentrated on his torso, head, and back. The bloodied kitchen knife, recovered from the bathroom, was identified as the murder weapon. As the brutality of the crime dominated headlines nationwide, investigators turned to the building's security cameras. The footage allowed them to reconstruct the final hours with chilling precision. At 4:32 a.m., Marcelli and Raffaella arrived together by car, parked near the entrance, and took the elevator to the 4th floor. Just over an hour later, Raffaella was seen again, this time alone. She entered the elevator and left the building. Only 13 seconds after her departure, another car arrived. At 5:44 a.m., cameras captured Igor and Mario entering the elevator. Igor, phone in hand, appeared to be arguing heatedly with his brother-in-law. 20 minutes later, Mario and Marcelli were recorded leaving the apartment. Instead of taking the elevator, they chose the stairs. Minutes after that, garage cameras showed them crossing the parking lot and exiting through the main door. Witness accounts reinforced this timeline. Several neighbors reported hearing shouting from the apartment, rage-filled voices that carried through the walls. They said one man screamed about betrayal, insisting that the people closest to him had conspired behind his back. He cried out that he loved a woman desperately, yet she had deceived him. These testimonies steered investigators toward their first working theory, a crime of passion, born of jealousy and betrayal within the family. With mounting evidence, police identified 3 main suspects: Marcelli, 20 years old, Mario, 23, and Raffaella, 26. A judge swiftly issued arrest warrants, ordering that the trio be held for 30 days. But when officers moved in, the suspects had vanished. As the search intensified, investigators uncovered another crucial detail. While Igor and Mario were driving earlier that night, Mario had received a phone call. His phone was connected to the car's multimedia system, and the caller's name, Rafaela, flashed across the dashboard. Igor was stunned. At first, he fell silent, then exploded with rage. The festive atmosphere of the evening evaporated instantly. Igor flooded Rafaela with calls and messages, demanding answers. But she never replied. Checking their location-sharing app, he discovered she was at Marcelli's apartment. Furious, Igor ordered Mario to take him there. Warned by Mario and by Igor's barrage of messages, Rafaela slipped out just minutes before the men arrived. Igor's sudden death left the Peretto family reeling, grief mixed with scandal. Ultimately, custody went to Igor's mother. Then, on September 6, less than a week after the murder, Marcelli and Rafaela voluntarily surrendered to the civil police. Around the same time, Mario's abandoned car was located near a post office. Inside, investigators found suspected bloodstains on the gear shift and seat, along with a bottle. The vehicle was seized and sent to the Directorate of Criminalistics for forensic testing. Days later, an anonymous tip from one of Igor's brothers led police to Mario. He was discovered hiding in a house less than 200 meters from Praia Grande, at the home of relatives connected to Rafaela's family. His short time on the run ended immediately. With all three suspects in custody, interrogations began and contradictions surfaced at once. Each gave a different version of events, yet all agreed on one shocking detail: Rafaela and Mario were secretly involved. Marcelli claimed she only learned of the affair that night. Rafaela went further, admitting that in the early hours of that morning, she and Marcelli had also shared an intimate encounter, though she insisted it was the first and only time. Through her lawyer, Marcelli stated that when Igor and Mario arrived at the apartment, she was alone, half-dressed, under the influence of alcohol and other substances. She admitted hearing them argue, but assumed it was another of their frequent disputes and chose not to intervene. According to her version, while she was in the dressing room, getting dressed, Igor kicked a mirror, shattering it in a fit of rage. When she went out, she found he was seriously injured. Mario presented a different account. He alleged that Igor attacked him with shards of glass from the broken mirror. Photographs of superficial injuries were submitted in support of this claim, but investigators noted that they had been taken more than 2 weeks after the killing, casting serious doubt on their credibility. Rafaela, meanwhile, denied any direct role in the attack. She explained that Igor had often threatened to kill her if she ever betrayed him, and so she fled the apartment out of fear for her life. While driving to her mother's house, she got a message from Mario. He said he had to drug Igor to keep him calm and warned her to not come near. According to her testimony, it was not until the following morning, at a gas station meeting with Mario and Marcelli, that she learned Igor was dead. In shock, but unable to process the situation, she nevertheless stayed with them as they tried to cover their tracks. At one point, she said she left Marcelli with family members while she accompanied Mario to buy clean clothes because his were blood-stained. The two then checked into a hotel, where Mario showered and changed. Soon afterward, Rafaela abandoned him and returned to the city. Detectives, however, reconstructed a very different scenario. Their working hypothesis was that Mario and Rafaela had conspired in advance. Screenshots of text messages exchanged hours before the murder revealed discussions about spending the night together, celebrating their football team's championship victory. For prosecutors, the motive was clear. Igor stood in the way of their affair, and his death promised financial gain. Mario would assume sole control of the motorcycle dealership, while Rafaela mother of Igor's son, would obtain inheritance rights. As Mario's wife, Marceli would also benefit indirectly. On these grounds, all three were formally charged with aggravated homicide, based on vile motives, préméditation. Investigators stressed the brutality of the betrayal. Igor had been killed not by strangers, but by people he trusted most. In response, the suspects began adjusting their narratives. Rafaela denied helping Mario hide, despite the fact that he was captured at a property belonging to her relatives. Marceli insisted she had seen nothing because of intoxication and claimed Mario entered the apartment on his own, using a code he already knew. Collectively, they attempted to portray Igor as unstable, violent, and threatening. Prosecutors, however, rejected these defenses. They highlighted that the shattered wardrobe had collapsed on top of Igor, suggesting he had been pushed rather than having caused the damage himself. They also noted that if Mario had truly acted in self-defense, the number of stab wounds would not have reached dozens, and at least one of the three would have sought medical assistance instead of fleeing. Later, Marceli's defense requested a second autopsy, though without explaining what new findings it might produce. The move angered members of Igor's family, who accused her of deliberately delaying proceedings and prolonging their suffering. By this point, one fact was undeniable. The case had become one of Brazil's most complex and emotionally charged criminal proceedings, marked by betrayal, hidden relationships, and financial motives. The courts determined that Rafaela, Marceli, and Mario would remain in preventive detention without a fixed release date while awaiting trial. Throughout 2025, multiple hearings were held. New witnesses came forward. The civil police delegate, who led the early investigation, testified, and further evidence was presented. The court announced that the case would likely proceed before a jury. By early July, after the evidentiary phase was completed, the tribunal denied all defense requests for release. The judge emphasized the exceptional brutality of the crime, the manipulation of evidence, and the defendant's attempts to flee as decisive reasons for keeping them in custody. As of today, the case remains pending. Brazilian society continues to follow every development closely, waiting to see whether the justice system will deliver a fair and transparent verdict, or whether the web of contradictions, betrayals, and alleged manipulation will obscure the truth. On September 18, 2005, an Ottawa police officer took his family for a walk in the park. In the middle of a quiet trail, he stopped suddenly. A pungent stench wafted through the autumn wind, a smell he recognized immediately. The smell of death. He followed the trail, deep into the bushes, and there, just a few dozen feet from the trail, under a hastily covered layer of leaves, was a half-decomposed body. It was naked, its clothes gone, and its face unrecognizable. It was Jennifer Teague, the 18-years-old, who had disappeared just over a week earlier. On her way home from a night shift, the terrible truth was revealed. Jennifer was no longer alive, and this was no accident. She had been murdered by someone still at large, possibly in the very neighborhood her family had thought was the safest. Now Ottawa was gripped by fear, and one haunting question spread through every home. Who killed Jennifer Teague? And how had a predator been walking freely among them, unseen until it was too late? Jennifer Teague was born on June 30, 1987, in Ottawa, Canada. She is the youngest of 3 siblings and is always taken care of by her 2 older brothers. After her parents divorced, she and her mother moved in with her grandmother. Her father lived nearby and remained an important part of their lives. In school, Jennifer was passionate about sports. She played baseball and soccer and was especially devoted to hockey. Her bedroom walls were covered with posters of her favorite players. Around the same time, she discovered a love for environmental protection and joined a group that visited elementary schools to teach kids about caring for nature. When she reached high school, Jennifer took on part-time jobs to pay her own expenses and save for the future. She wasn't sure what career to pursue after graduation. She considered fashion design, but also thought about working in environmental protection. By September 2005, at 18 years old, she had started her senior year and was eagerly looking forward to graduation. She continued working the evening shift at a local Wendy's while attending school. At the time, she had adopted a kitten from a rescue and was looking forward to her next paycheck so she could get her cat vaccinated. On Wednesday, September 7, after school, Jennifer took a short break at home and then left for her evening shift. Taking the bus to work, around midnight, she closed the restaurant and began walking home. The buses had stopped running, so she faced a walk of just over a mile. Even though it was late, most of the way was on well-lit main streets, which was the route she took every day, so she wasn't too worried. After leaving work, Jennifer called two friends who were also finishing evening shifts nearby. They agreed to meet outside a 24-hour convenience store about halfway between her job and her house. The three of them sat together for about an hour, talking and sharing stories from their day. At around 1:30 a.m., Jennifer said goodbye and headed home. She had about an 18-minute walk left. The next evening, her mother began to worry. She had not heard from her since the night before. Jennifer's room was in the basement, so when she came home late, her family often didn't see her. In the mornings, she typically left early to catch the school bus before her mother and brothers woke up. When Jennifer didn't return from school and didn't answer calls, concern turned to fear. She always told her mother where she was going, but that day there was no message. Her mother found out that she had missed school and then missed her shift at the restaurant. Panic set in. She called all of Jennifer's friends. No one had seen her since the night before. Her father also hadn't heard from her. With no leads, her parents reported her missing. Although Jennifer was 18, police acted quickly and began a search. Officers interviewed friends and classmates, while family and neighbors canvassed the area. Some searched the streets, others printed and posted flyers with Jennifer's photo and details. Investigators first concluded it was unlikely Jennifer had run away. Family and friends described her as extremely responsible and never one to disappear without telling someone. Detectives then reconstructed her movements. Jennifer's friends confirmed that they parted ways with her at around 1:30 a.m., with her heading home while they headed the other way. Soon, investigators learned something new. Jennifer hadn't left work alone. A co-worker named Mark had walked with her part of the way before she split off to meet her friends at the convenience store. Detectives visited Mark and immediately noticed fresh scratches on his face. Suspicious at first glance, he claimed they were shaving cuts and showed them his razor, which proved nothing. Investigators began to suspect he might be involved in Jennifer's disappearance and that the scratches could be from her fighting back. However, there was no evidence linking him to a crime. They asked Mark to take a polygraph. He agreed, and the results showed no deception. That lowered suspicion. Detectives also investigated Jennifer's ex-boyfriend. He said they remained on good terms, hadn't spoken that night, and that he'd been home. He, too, passed a polygraph, and investigators ruled him out. Attention then shifted to Boris, a 21-year-old local whom Jennifer knew. Friends had seen him drive past while they sat outside the store that night. Further checks revealed Boris had a troubling history: erratic behavior, prior stalking accusations, and a restraining order. Friends added that he had recently asked Jennifer out, and she declined. Detectives interviewed Boris. He denied involvement, but appeared nervous and struggled with some questions. He consented to a search of his car. One window was shattered. Investigators considered whether it broke during an abduction. but Boris said it happened earlier. He also took a polygraph and showed no signs of deception. Despite his behavior and past, there was no solid evidence tying him to Jennifer's disappearance. Meanwhile, police, family, and friends searched the city but found no trace of Jennifer or her belongings. A new theory spread in Ottawa. A serial offender could be responsible. 2 years earlier, Ardith Wood had disappeared elsewhere in the city and was later found dead in a river. With no arrest in that case, people feared the same predator might be involved. With few leads, investigators intensified efforts. They established a command center in a church near the store where Jennifer was last seen. Hundreds of locals joined the search, dividing into teams to comb different areas. Police used search dogs, helicopters with heat sensors, and conducted door-to-door checks along Jennifer's route home. Soon, a potential lead emerged. A woman on the edge of Jennifer's neighborhood reported hearing a piercing scream around 1:30 a.m. She looked toward the main road, but saw nothing and didn't call police at the time. Given the timing and location, detectives now believe the scream may have been Jennifer's, possibly the moment of her abduction. Another neighbor also reported hearing a scream that night, but saw nothing helpful. A week passed with no sign of Jennifer and no solid leads. Hopes of finding her alive began to fade. Detectives reclassified the case as a possible homicide, unlocking additional resources. They held a press conference asking the public for information, and Jennifer's parents pleaded with the presumed captor to release her. Still, the search turned up nothing. Investigators tried a new approach. Jennifer's neighborhood was made up of private homes with yards, each requiring a warrant to search, and no judge would approve warrants for hundreds of properties, so detectives went door to door asking for voluntary consent. Most residents agreed, and officers searched hundreds of homes and yards, but found nothing. This continued for several days until everything changed. On September 18, about a week and a half after Jennifer disappeared, a police officer took his family to a park on the edge of town. As he walked along the trail, he smelled a familiar odor of decomposition, so he followed it into the woods. A few dozen feet from the trail, he discovered a human body, partially covered with branches and leaves. He immediately called it in because the body was so badly decomposed that it could not be identified by the naked eye. It was turned over to the medical examiner. All of the clothing was missing. Suspecting the body might be Jennifer's, the lead detective made a strategic decision. He set up a police tent by the parking lot at the trailhead to mislead the press about the true location. The reasoning was straightforward. Only the killer would know the actual spot where the body was hidden. Soon after, medical examiners confirmed the remains were Jennifer's. However, due to advanced decomposition, the exact cause of death could not be determined. The sample was sent to a lab in Toronto for further analysis, but the results remained unchanged. One thing is certain, this was no accident. This was a murder. Police again appealed to the public, releasing dozens of surveillance images from the convenience store where Jennifer had been with friends the night she disappeared. Detectives suspected her abductor might have seen her there, waited, and followed her home. They worked to identify everyone in the footage, but a few men remained unidentified. Around the same time, another lead emerged. After news of the body spread, a witness said he had been walking through the same park in the early morning hours of September 8. He clearly remembered seeing a man standing near the trail entrance and described him in enough detail for police to draw a sketch. Detectives believed this man was likely the killer and hoped someone would recognize him, but the sketch was vague and could resemble many people. It generated another wave of tips, all of which led nowhere. Things got even more complicated when two different men confessed to Jennifer's murder. A closer look revealed that both were liars and that they had no reason to commit the crime. They were just looking for attention. From then on, the case was almost dead. The clues were thin, and the police still lacked the evidence to get any closer to solving the case. Later, investigators learned that the murder of Ardith Wood, killed 2 years earlier, had been solved. The suspect was a local man, and detectives checked whether he might also be responsible for Jennifer's death. It was quickly confirmed he was not in the city when Jennifer was abducted. Ruling out any connection, by early 2006, detectives made additional public appeals, but nothing panned out. Then, on June 9, an unexpected call came in from a local hospital. Staff reported that a man had run into the street completely naked, shouting that he had killed Jennifer Teague. Police rushed to interview him, and he confessed. There was a major issue. Toxicology showed he had taken 5 times the typical dose of hallucinogenic mushrooms. Once sober, he claimed no memory of the confession and denied involvement. He said he knew about the case only from the news, and that on the night Jennifer vanished, he was at a friend's house playing video games. However, when detectives went to speak with the friend, they learned he had recently suffered a serious accident that left him with partial memory loss. Detectives couldn't ignore the mounting concerns and decided to investigate further. Kevin Davis, 24 years old, had no criminal record and worked at a local pizzeria. What stood out was his location. He lived across the street from the woman who reported hearing a scream, and only a short distance from the church, where police had set up their command center. As they reviewed the case, detectives realized they had already spoken to Kevin in the first days after Jennifer disappeared. Because he lived nearby, officers had knocked on his door as part of their routine canvassing. At that time, Kevin said he'd been home all night, a claim his mother, sleeping in the next room, supported. Nearly a year later, however, he changed his story, saying he'd actually been at a friend's house playing video games. That wasn't the only concern. Detectives also found an early tip, submitted right after Jennifer's body was discovered, suggesting they look at Kevin because he resembled the composite sketch. Investigators had initially dismissed it amid hundreds of unverified leads. Now, with his confession and alibi constantly changing, Kevin becomes even more suspicious. However, there is one major obstacle. There is no hard evidence. No DNA, no fingerprints, nothing directly linking him to the murder. And Kevin had withdrawn his confession. With the case stalled, detectives wondered how they could ever hold him accountable. For weeks, they re-examined files, explored new angles, and searched for anything they might have missed. Nothing clicked. They began to fear Kevin would never be arrested. Then, unexpectedly, everything changed. On June 26, just weeks after being released from the hospital, Kevin approached a neighbor and asked for help. When the neighbor asked what was wrong, Kevin told him to call the police because he had killed Jennifer Teague. He then went to a nearby store, saw a police officer, and calmly repeated the same admission. Police brought him to the station. This time, detectives were meticulous to prevent any retraction. They read him his rights and had medical staff test his blood for banned substance and alcohol. The tests came back clean. Only then did they start recording his confession. Kevin said he had harbored a deep resentment toward women for most of his life because he felt unloved. In the days before the murder, he began taking his mother's car at night, carrying a knife, rope, and a gag. He admitted he was hunting for a victim who met 2 criteria: young and defenseless. His plan was to kidnap someone, take her home, and abuse her. He said he finally decided to act after 2 personal setbacks, losing his job and the death of a beloved pet. On the night Jennifer disappeared, Kevin parked near the convenience store and noticed 3 girls outside, laughing and talking. He stayed out of the camera's view and waited for them to separate. Around 1:30 a.m., Jennifer said goodbye to her friends and walked toward her neighborhood, despite generally good lighting. Parts of the street were dark. Kevin attacked her in one of those shadowed areas, forced her into his car at knife point, and drove her to his house. His mother was asleep in the next room, so he kept quiet. He threatened Jennifer with a knife, led her into the bedroom, and attempted to abuse her, but failed. Enraged, he strangled her to death. His mother, asleep on the other side of the wall, heard nothing. After Kevin confessed, detectives asked him to show where he had left Jennifer's body. He led them directly to the real site, not the decoy location with the press tent, but the actual spot known only to investigators. That alone proved his confession was genuine. He then explained why he decided to confess, and his reasons stunned the detectives. A few weeks earlier, when officers visited his home, Kevin panicked and became convinced he was about to be arrested. His paranoia escalated. He believed police were watching him constantly. At work, he even made a co-worker lift his shirt to check for a wire. Consumed by fear, Kevin decided the only way to end it was to admit what he had done. He had no idea the detectives actually had no evidence. If he had stayed silent, he might have avoided prosecution. Instead, Kevin was charged with murder and jailed to await trial. From jail, he tried to retract his confession, but it was too late. The trial began in January 2008, and Kevin pled guilty again. Because of that plea, the case moved quickly. He received a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 25 years. In his final statement, Kevin said he regretted his actions and would give his life if it could bring Jennifer back. Jennifer's father, who was in court, later said he didn't believe him. To Jennifer's father, Kevin's words sounded like an attempt to reduce his sentence rather than true remorse. Kevin went to prison with no guarantee he will be released after 25 years. One last note. In 2015, Jennifer's father published a book about the case and how the family endured the unimaginable. He wrote that his goal was to help others who have lost loved ones, showing that even in the darkest times, it is possible to find a way through the pain. In the garage of a posh Michigan home, among boxes of children's toys, the police found a large blue duffel bag. When they cut open the plastic wrap, they were stunned. Inside was the torso of a woman, headless, armless, legless, still fully clothed. The body was hidden right among her own children's belongings. The victim was Tara Grant, a wife and mother who had been missing for 3 weeks. The house belonged to Tara and her husband, Stephen Grant. The man who had just appeared on television asking for help finding his wife was her husband. From the moment the bag was opened, the image of the model family fell apart. Stephen's testimony revealed many contradictions, and the suffering husband quickly became the focus of suspicion. Behind the happy photos was a marriage simmering with jealousy, narcissism, and control, conflicts that had built up over years and finally exploded into a shocking tragedy. Tara Lynn was born on June 28, 1972, in Macomb County, Michigan. She is one of 2 daughters of Gerald and Mary and is especially close to her older sister Alicia. Over time, they became best friends. Tara was bright and cheerful, with dark curly hair and a wide smile. She excelled in school and still made time for activities like basketball and cheerleading. Growing up on a Michigan farm, Tara dreamed of getting an education, becoming financially independent, and making a name for herself. After high school, she enrolled in a community college, then transferred to Michigan State University, where she earned a bachelor's degree in business. Soon after graduating, she became a consultant at Washington Group International, a company offering engineering, construction, and management services to businesses and governments worldwide. It was a dramatic change from her small-town farm life. Not long before, Tara and her family would rise at dawn to feed livestock. Now, she had entered the world of big business, landing her dream job. With the company headquartered in San Francisco and offices around the globe, her work allowed her to travel internationally. For a country girl, it seemed like a dream come true. Tara set her goals and achieved them, both in her career and in her personal life. Her partner, Stephen Grant, was about 2 years older. He once studied at Michigan State University, but decided to pause his studies when he received a career opportunity. Believing that education could be pursued later, Stephen eventually worked for a Michigan politician. He and Tara shared a lot in common, but their first meeting didn't go well. Tara was an attractive, educated, ambitious young woman. Stephen came off as ordinary and awkward, and not particularly sharp. Classmates even joked that if Stephen ever committed a robbery, he'd leave his ID at the scene. Seeking approval, he often exaggerated and invented stories. Sensing his dishonesty, Tara made it clear she wasn't interested. But Stephen persisted. His persistence coincided with a tragedy. Tara's grandmother passed away. When Tara flew home for the funeral, Stephen unexpectedly showed up after driving several hours to support her. It was awkward. Tara was dating someone else at the time, and he was also at the funeral. Stephen stayed calm, joined the family for dinner, and, when offered a place to stay, politely declined and returned home. That gesture became a turning point. After Tara ended her other relationship, she gave Stephen a chance. Things moved quickly. They started dating, fell in love, and within a few months moved in together. Stephen believed he would never find someone like Tara. He set out to win her heart and soon proposed on the steps of the Detroit Institute of Arts. They married in 1996. Their daughter, Lindsay, was born in 2000, and their son, Ian, in 2002. By 2007, the family had settled into a prestigious neighborhood. They bought a large 4-bedroom home with a big yard and a garage, and their children attended a private school. Financially, they were doing well. Most of the income came from Tara, the primary breadwinner. After losing his job in politics, Stephen worked part-time at his father's tool and paint store and took care of the children while Tara traveled for work. This arrangement can be perfectly normal when the wife earns more. However, Stephen struggled with this role. Over time, he grew resentful of Tara's education and career success. He disregarded the fact that her hard work paid for their beautiful home, good neighborhood, and their children's quality education. Stephen's pride was hurt, and he repeatedly told friends and relatives that his wife, Tara, didn't support or appreciate him. He had a hard time accepting her success, which took a toll on his ego, especially since her job had required frequent business travel for the past 4 years. Due to Tara's busy schedule, Stephen took on most of the parenting duties, which was difficult. Still, he made no effort to find a higher-paying job to contribute more to the family finances. At one point, Tara was away on business 5 days a week. Recently, she had been working in Puerto Rico and came home only on weekends to see Stephen and the children. She called daily, sent gifts, and left heartfelt notes. Even if she wasn't physically present, she devoted her spare moments to her family. On the surface, Tara and Stephen appear to be a successful, happy couple. Inside the home, however, there was a quiet power struggle. Stephen considered himself the head of the family, but Tara was the primary earner. This dynamic threatened Stephen's sense of masculinity. Those close to Tara and Stephen noticed troubling personality traits in him, especially his controlling nature. Tara often yielded during arguments, knowing that fighting would only make things worse. She would hold her tongue and let Stephen feel he had won. Deep down, He knew Tara was the true pillar of the household, and that fueled his anger and resentment. To soothe his ego, he began messaging ex-girlfriends, complaining that Tara was never home. Stephen constantly suspected Tara of having an affair with his boss, even installing spyware on his computer to monitor her emails. He wanted proof of betrayal, but there was none, because Tara loved him. If her boss sent weekend messages about work, Stephen would get anxious and start another argument. Despite his accusations, Stephen's own behavior was far from upright. After venting to his exes about his family woes, he would flirt and make suggestive comments. When asked why he didn't divorce if he was so unhappy, he replied that he didn't want to break up the family or make the children suffer. With Tara often away, the household became chaotic. The children, Lindsay and Ian, were only 6 and 4 years old, and Stephen, who had been tasked with running the household, was exhausted. Since they could afford help, Tara suggested hiring a housekeeper to ease his burden and give him time to rest and pursue hobbies. They settled on a live-in nanny who could also handle household chores. Since he would be working closely with the nanny, Stephen interviewed and selected her himself. It's no surprise that he favors young, attractive women. That's how 18-year-old Verena Dierkes, a recent high school graduate from Germany, moved in with his family. As a newcomer to the United States, Verena was eager to make the most of the opportunity. What followed was predictable: a lonely adult man and a young, attractive woman sharing a home 5 days a week quickly grew close. Stephen began by flirting and oversharing about his marriage, claiming Tara was unfaithful. He then offered Verena a massage, and soon they were in bed together. Their relationship began about 6 weeks before the tragic events that would later occur in the family. On February 14, 2007, Valentine's Day, Stephen called the police to report Tara missing. He told them that she had run away from home earlier, leaving him with the children, which was why he did not call the police immediately. He said he last saw Tara on Friday, February 9, when she returned from a business trip to Puerto Rico. According to Stephen, Tara began unpacking and said she needed to leave a day earlier than usual. Typically, she spent weekends at home and flew out on Monday, but this time she planned to leave on Sunday. Stephen was upset. She had just returned and was already preparing to go again, and they argued. The second reason Stephen was upset was a simple request from Tara. Last weekend, she asked him to pick up her car from the repair shop. This innocent favor made Stephen feel like a servant or handyman. He didn't hear respect in his wife's words, and their arguments intensified. Tara grabbed her unpacked bags, left the bedroom, and walked out to the driveway while talking on the phone. Stephen saw her get into a dark car, waiting outside, and drive off into the night. No one saw her again. Stephen was both angry and upset. He had to tell the children that their mother, whom they'd been eager to see all week, had left without visiting them. At first, Stephen wasn't worried. He was used to his wife being away from home. The next day, he called her parents, who reassured him that Tara had probably gone back to Puerto Rico, but then her company called to report she had missed an important meeting, completely out of character for someone so devoted to her work. Despite that alarming call, Stephen didn't contact the police immediately. He waited until the next evening, 5 days after she disappeared, before filing a missing person report. He did not seem particularly concerned that Tara was out of contact. Unlike Stephen, Tara's sister, Alicia, dropped everything and flew to Tara's house to support him. Lindsay and Ian. She launched an active search, calling friends and acquaintances and putting up flyers. Stephen took no part in the effort and made this position clear through his attorney. Even after the police suggested they might be searching for a body rather than a living person, Stephen did not change his stance. Concerned citizens scoured the area on foot, searched difficult terrain with ATVs and helicopters, and used dogs. Police and volunteers continued to hope they would find Tara, alive or dead. The day after the report was filed, police pulled Stephen over and arrested him for driving with an expired license. He claimed the traffic stop was just a pretext to detain him and question him about Tara's disappearance. Investigators found his account unconvincing. Beyond visible injuries, a mark on his nose and scratches on his hands, his behavior raised red flags. He was very nervous during the interview, fidgeting constantly. The more they asked about his relationship with his wife, the more agitated he became. His answers sounded logical, but something about his demeanor seemed off. His story also didn't align with the facts. Tara had effectively vanished. No phone activity, no credit or debit card use, no travel tickets, and no record of leaving the country. According to Stephen, she left in a dark car and disappeared. There was another inconsistency. He told detectives that Tara had been on the phone before she left, but when investigators checked the phone records, they found no incoming or outgoing calls. The supposed phone conversation was a fabrication. After her disappearance, only Stephen left a few voicemails on her phone. As officers dug deeper, their suspicions about Stephen grew, especially as he became less cooperative. He stopped answering questions and refused to take a polygraph. He declined to take one at the police station, saying he would do it with an independent examiner instead. He grew angry and called his attorney. His distrust and refusal to cooperate suggested he might know more than he was telling police. Nevertheless, Stephen was released on bail. Over the next 2 weeks, he appeared in the media several times. At times, accusing authorities of harassment, Stephen did not help search for Tara. Instead, he tried to look like he cared. He refused to cooperate with police and hired a private investigator to find out what happened. That was all he did. He never called detectives for updates. While the sheriff's office held daily press conferences, Stephen kept appearing in the media to shape public opinion. He cried on camera and begged for Tara's return. He praises Tara as a good wife, but at the same time defames her by claiming that he has replaced her in taking care of the children. To many, his tears looked fake. Whenever Tara's family said something kind about her, Stephen contradicted them. It was unclear whether he wanted to defend himself or damage Tara's reputation. By then, Stephen was the police's primary and only suspect. Investigators placed him under surveillance. They were also concerned that he refused to allow a full search of the home without a warrant. After Tara was reported missing, nanny Verena Dierkes spoke to detectives. She did not disclose her affair with Stephen. Fearing the consequences, she had developed feelings for him and believed his version of a marital dispute, so she tried to protect him. She left his home and returned to Germany on February 21, but continued to keep in secret contact with him until a major breakthrough in the case on February 20, 2007, in southeast Michigan. A woman walking in a park stumbled upon a horrifying sight. Behind the trees, stuck in a crevice in the trunk, she saw a plastic bag. Spurred by curiosity, she opened the bag. She noticed gloves and pieces of metal inside, and the bag had obvious bloodstains. Panicked, she put the bag down and called the police. Testing confirmed the blood belonged to Tara, reinforcing police suspicions that they were searching for a body, not a missing person, though at the time, this was only a working theory. After the discovery, police launched a large-scale search of the park for more evidence. They also obtained a search warrant for Tara and Stephen's home in Washington Township, Michigan, on the evening of March 2, 2007. 3 weeks after Tara's disappearance, officers arrived to conduct a thorough search. Stephen, who had not been arrested, took the dog for a walk. Out of sight, he called a friend for a ride. The friend noticed Stephen was shaken but assumed it was because of the search. In reality, Stephen was unraveling for another reason. In the garage, officers found a large green bag next to a box of children's toys. Inside was a bundle wrapped in multiple layers of plastic. When an officer touched it, it felt soft. They unwrapped it and found human remains, a torso from the neck to the upper thighs, still clothed. Detectives realized they had found part of Tara Grant's body, hidden in a tarp bag near her children's belongings. Because police had lacked grounds to detain Stephen beforehand, he could now easily flee. As investigators rushed to get an arrest warrant, Stephen borrowed a friend's car and drove to his sister's house, where his children, 6-year-old Lindsay and 4-year-old Ian, were staying. He said goodbye to his children, spoke with his sister, and then fled. At a press conference, the sheriff's office urged Stephen to turn himself in. Those who knew Stephen doubted he would. Even Stephen's lawyer said he had plans to end his life. According to the lawyer, Stephen was desperate and barely coherent when he called. After Tara's death, their 2 young children were left behind, their lives forever shaped by their father's horrific actions. Relatives on both sides focused on protecting them. Both Tara's family and Stephen's relatives tried to shield the children from the chaos. Although everyone knew their mother was gone and their father was on the run, the children were not told. Keeping the unfolding tragedy from them was extremely difficult, as reporters kept knocking, seeking interviews. Family members even hung a sign on the front door asking people not to disturb because the children were sleeping. While authorities searched for Stephen, they also had to recover the rest of Tara's remains. Only her torso had been found in the garage. Detectives began by searching the park, where a blood-stained bag had been discovered, where Tara often played with her children on weekends. Police combed the area and soon found additional remains buried in shallow graves. Stephen appeared to have made little effort to hide them. Some parts were never found, and some showed signs of animal activity. 2 days later, by tracing a call Stephen made to his sister, police arrested him 224 miles from the crime scene in a state park in northern Michigan. His escape did not last long. He was found early on March 4, lying under a tree without shoes or outerwear. His shirt and pants were soaked. Semi-conscious and near death, he had walked through snow for 10 hours. After arriving at the park by car, he took alcohol and drugs from his sister's house with the intention of ending his life. He also bought a toy gun, planning to provoke police into shooting him if they found him before hypothermia set in. After his arrest, he was airlifted to a hospital for frostbite and hypothermia. When he regained consciousness, he confessed from his hospital bed, though police had already heard the confession. On March 3, Stephen had called his housekeeper and nanny, Verena, and told her he had killed Tara, claiming it was an accident. Verena immediately cut ties with him and reported what he said to the lead detective. She later flew from Germany to testify against him. Stephen said that on the evening of February 9, 2007, he and Tara had a serious argument. He was already irritable and resentful about staying home with the children. When Tara mentioned an upcoming business trip, he grew furious. He was in bed, undressed, while Tara unpacked. She said she had to leave for Puerto Rico a day early because her boss would be there. Hearing about her boss, Stephen snapped and shouted that she should go to her lover immediately. Tara tried to leave to defuse the situation, but he grabbed her arm. She slapped him, and he shoved her hard in the back. She fell, hitting her head, enraged. Tara said she was done and planned to file for divorce, leaving him without money or the children, since she was the breadwinner. Her words enraged Stephen. He straddled her as she lay on the floor and strangled her with his hands. Tara fought back, but he was stronger. Unable to look her in the eyes, He pulled a shirt over her face while he continued to choke her. As soon as Stephen realized Tara was dead, he panicked. Their children were asleep at home, and the nanny, Verena, wasn't there yet but could return at any moment. Stephen texted Verena, telling her not to come over that day, and then tried to move Tara's body, but it was too heavy. He left the room, got one of his belts, looped it around Tara's neck, and dragged her down the stairs to the garage to load her into the car. At one point, he dropped the body and heard a dull thud that he later described as sounding like a cracked watermelon. Just after he got her into the car, he heard a noise. Even though Stephen texted, Verena still returned because she had nowhere else to go. Disheveled and half-dressed, Stephen rushed out to meet her. A fresh cut from his fight with Tara was visible on his face. He told Verena he'd argued with his wife, that Tara had slapped him, and then left. He reinforced the lie by repeatedly calling Tara's phone, leaving voicemails, and asking what he should tell the children. All the while, he knew Tara's body was in his car. He also took Verena's phone and deleted their messages, aware that their affair could be seen as a motive. The next day, Stephen drove Tara's remains to his father's workshop at the tool and paint store, making sure no one was around. He laid out a tarp, drank alcohol for courage, and began dismembering the body. He vomited several times during the process. He divided the remains into 14 parts and destroyed the items Tara had brought on her business trip to make it look as if she'd left voluntarily. When he finished, he went home and tried to act normal. Once he calmed down, he decided to dispose of the remains. He loaded the carefully wrapped body parts into a bag, placed it on his children's sled, and headed to a park a few kilometers away. Then, something went wrong. While descending a hill, he lost control of the sled. It slid away, the bag fell, and the contents spilled onto the ground. He had to chase after it, frantically gathering the scattered packages and stuffing them back into the bag before anyone saw. He then continued with his plan to dispose of the remains. He went to a dense, wooded area, dug a couple of shallow holes, and tossed the bags in, hoping animals would destroy the evidence. But his plan was thwarted when a woman in the park found a bag containing blood-stained items. Realizing the police were preparing a large-scale search, he panicked. He retrieved Tara's torso and hid it in the garage near his children's toys. Believing detectives couldn't search his property without a warrant, he felt secure. The next day, however, police arrived with a warrant. Stephen was arrested and charged with murdering his wife. His attorney, who had previously defended him, recused himself. At Tara's funeral, no one spoke Stephen's name. Tara knew how to love and be loved. She could forgive, believe, and understand. Her tragic mistake was trusting the wrong man and failing to see his spiteful, obvious nature. In February 2008, Stephen Grant was sentenced to 50 to 80 years in prison for the murder of Tara Grant, plus an additional 6 to 10 years for mutilation of a body. The more Tara succeeded, the more insignificant Stephen felt. Unable to accept it, he complained, belittled her, and had an affair with the young housekeeper to prop up his fragile ego. Because of his selfish and despicable actions, the children lost both parents overnight. The consequences of his crime were devastating. In June 2008, a few months after Stephen was sentenced, his father, William Allen Grant, died. He owned the tool store where Stephen had dismembered his wife's body. Unable to cope with what his adult son had done, William shot himself. In that sense, Stephen was indirectly responsible for his father's death as well. Stephen and Tara's children, Lindsay and Ian, later took their aunt Alicia Standifer's surname, dropping the Grant surname. They had some understanding of what happened to their mother, but did not know the details. Tara's family said they would let the children read Stephen's confession once they were adults. The family wanted to protect the children from the truth for as long as possible because their lives had already been devastated. But the reality was even worse. It was later revealed that 6-year-old Lindsay and 4-year-old Ian witnessed their mother's murder. They kept silent until after the trial, then told their aunt and uncle that they had seen their parents arguing that night and watched as their mother died. When Stephen leaves the room, Lindsay runs to her mother and tries to wake her, not understanding that she is dead. When her father returned to the bedroom, Lindsay hid under the bed and saw him drag her mother's lifeless body toward the door. Will Stephen Grant ever realize his actions if he is to rot in prison for the rest of his life? A young woman returned home after a night of celebration. By dawn, that same house had transformed into the scene of a chilling discovery: a splintered door, a lifeless body, and a silence that concealed unspeakable violence. What unfolded within those walls in the early hours of August 16, 2024, would soon be remembered as one of the most harrowing crimes in recent years in Jocotenango. Andrea Sanchez was born on September 23, 1998, in Guatemala City. She was the youngest of several sisters. Their life unfolded quietly, like so many other ordinary families. As Andrea reached adulthood, she decided to leave the bustle of the city and move to Jocotenango, a small town in the department of Zacatepec, about 25 kilometers from her birthplace. Life there was slower, surrounded by the colonial beauty of nearby Antigua. For Andrea, it was a place where she could live more peacefully. Blending into the rhythm of the community, faith was at the heart of her world. Andrea became an active member of the Hermandad Esquipulas de Antigua, Guatemala, one of the country's most respected religious brotherhoods. She took part in many church activities, especially during Holy Week processions, where her devotion and discipline were clearly seen. Those who knew her remembered her as spiritual, quiet, and humble. A young woman whose life was shaped by faith and service. It was within this environment that Andrea met Carlos Monzon. He too was active in the Brotherhood, often helping during liturgical events and assisting wherever needed. His devotion earned him respect among fellow members. At first, he appeared to be a man of strong character, steady faith. What started as a simple connection through shared religious commitments gradually grew into something deeper. Their friendship strengthened, and over time, it blossomed into a romantic relationship. Before long, whispers began spreading in their circle. It was clear Andrea and Carlos were more than just acquaintances. To outsiders, they seemed like the perfect couple. Social media only reinforced this impression. Photos filled with smiles, affectionate captions, and gestures of tenderness that painted the image of a flawless love story. Their relationship appeared solid, even enviable. But behind those carefully chosen images, the truth was far more complicated. According to friends and relatives, Carlos was not the calm, steady man he pretended to be. He was jealous, controlling, and increasingly possessive. Andrea began to show signs of feeling trapped in an unhealthy relationship. The tenderness displayed in public often gave way to tension and fear in private. Close friends later recalled that Andrea sometimes confided in them about her worries. She admitted that Carlos frightened her, especially when he drank. His moods could change suddenly, turning aggressive, even threatening. While not every outburst turned physical, his words and tone carried a weight that left Andrea shaken and deeply unsettled. This fragile balance carried on until the night of August 15, 2024. At around 11:30 p.m., Andrea and Carlos joined thousands of others at one of Guatemala's most iconic celebrations, the Feria de Jocotenango. This traditional festival, held annually in honor of the Virgin of the Assumption, fills the town with music, food, and joy. It is one of the most beloved events of the year, drawing people from far and wide. For Andrea and Carlos, that night's fair was just like another ordinary celebration, but in reality, it marked the beginning of a chain of events that no one could have predicted. Amid the music, food stalls, bright decorations, and festive atmosphere of the Feria de Jocotenango, Andrea and Carlos blended in perfectly with the lively crowd. They laughed together, mingled with friends, posed for photos, and shared drinks, giving every impression of being just happy couple enjoying one of Guatemala's most iconic celebrations. To those around them, they looked carefree and in love. The outing lasted until late at night and early in the morning. Friends later recalled Andrea appearing in high spirits when she headed home to Jocotenango. She seemed content, smiling and cheerful after an evening surrounded by celebration, but as dawn began to break, the atmosphere in her home shifted into something far more sinister. According to later accounts, Carlos entered Andrea's house in the early morning and discovered her lifeless. What followed raised immediate suspicions. Instead of calling emergency services right away, his first instinct was to phone a friend. His voice was described as nervous and unsteady, though not completely broken, as he claimed Andrea had died without giving clear details about how or why. Only afterward did he contact the emergency services. Emergency responders arrived to what seemed like a peaceful scene. Andrea's body was on the living room couch. She had no obvious injuries. No blood was visible, and the furniture was undisturbed, suggesting no struggle had occurred. Initially, it appeared she had simply died quietly in her sleep. But investigators quickly noticed troubling inconsistencies. The bedroom door had clear signs of damage, the wooden frame was splintered, and the lock appeared forced, suggesting someone had broken in or attempted to. This detail stood in sharp contrast to the otherwise peaceful appearance of the room and immediately raised questions about what had really happened during those final hours. By August 16, 2024, word of Andrea's death spread quickly through Jocotenango and surrounding communities. Neighbors were left shocked and unsettled. Andrea was remembered as a gentle, devout young woman, known for her involvement in her religious brotherhood and her respectful demeanor. The mysterious circumstances of her death created unease and confusion. At first, there was no official cause of death, and early reports offered more speculation than clarity. The lack of obvious violence made the case even more puzzling, as if crucial pieces of the story were still missing. Authorities knew from the start that this would require a meticulous and thorough investigation. One of the first major leads came not from the crime scene itself, but from social media. A photograph Andrea had posted just hours earlier at the fair, smiling alongside Carlos, illuminated by the colorful lights of the celebration, became a key piece of evidence. The photo's digital timestamp and metadata confirmed the exact time it was taken, and friends' accounts supported the timeline. It also firmly established Carlos as the last known person to have been with Andrea while she was still alive. A photo capturing a fun evening accidentally became a keepsake of her final moments. Investigators began to reconstruct Andrea's last night. Step by step, security cameras in Jocotenango provided critical footage that contradicted Carlos's version of events. At 2:44 a.m., cameras captured Andrea and Carlos walking together toward her house. By 4:00 a.m., Carlos was seen leaving alone. Just 20 minutes later, he returned briefly, only to leave again at 4:54 a.m. on a motorcycle. Most notably, at 6:47 a.m., cameras showed him re-entering Andrea's home, this time wearing different clothes. Shortly afterward, he made the emergency call, reporting her death. The timeline suggested that Andrea was attacked between 2:44 a.m. and 4:00 a.m. Shortly after arriving home, forensic analysis indicated that her body had been moved from the bedroom to the couch, likely in an attempt to stage the scene and downplay signs of violence. The damaged doorframe, combined with the suspicious sequence of Carlos's movements, made investigators increasingly confident that this was no accident or break-in, but an intentional act carried out. For investigators, the reconstructed timeline left little doubt. Sometime between 2:44 a.m. and 4:00 a.m., Carlos had attacked Andrea inside her home. Evidence indicated that he used force to silence her, likely covering her mouth and nose with an object until she could no longer breathe. In what seemed like an attempt to divert suspicion, he staged the scene. Andrea's body had been moved and placed on the living room couch to create the impression she had died peacefully. Her bedroom door was deliberately damaged from the outside, as if someone had broken in. The setup was designed to suggest a burglary gone wrong, but the inconsistencies were obvious. Nothing was stolen. There was no mess or overturned furniture, and Andrea's body showed no signs of abuse. Instead, the details pointed to a calculated and personal act, violence disguised as chance. The investigation took a decisive turn with the forensic report from the Instituto Nacional de Ciencias Forenses. The findings were clear. Andrea had died of asphyxia due to suffocation, but before that, she had suffered blunt force trauma to her head and neck. The cranioencephalic injuries matched a direct assault and were incompatible with an accident. With this report, the version presented by Carlos collapsed. As word of the case spread, the story quickly moved beyond Jocotenango and reached national headlines. Media outlets reported every new detail: the betrayal, the staged crime scene, the fate of a young woman known for her quiet faith. Andrea's death was no longer just a neighborhood mystery. It had become a symbol of outrage across Guatemala. Social media exploded with disbelief and anger. People, friends, neighbors, and even strangers shared their grief and support. The incident was quickly recognized as femicide, not just a random tragedy. The public was outraged and demanded justice immediately. On September 26, 2024, just over a month after Andrea's death, authorities acted. Carlos was arrested during a judicial operation that included a search of Andrea's home, where investigators collected key evidence that would strengthen the case. Combined with the contradictions in Carlos's testimony and the forensic findings, the picture became clear. Prosecutors advanced a straightforward hypothesis: jealousy was the motive. Testimonies from friends and family confirmed this standing suspicions. Carlos had a controlling personality and often showed aggression, particularly when drinking. Their relationship, once thought to be tender and devout, was now revealed as one overshadowed by fear and domination. The judicial process moved swiftly. On October 3rd, the initial hearing took place. The prosecution presented the sequence of events, forensic analysis, and increasing evidence implicating Carlos in Andrea's death. When questioned, Carlos provided his account of his actions that night and the following morning. However, he never admitted guilt. His testimony contained numerous inconsistencies and evasive answers. He tried to explain why he was at and returned to Andrea's home, but avoided directly answering key questions. This lack of clarity strengthened the suspicions against him. At the hearing's conclusion, the court formally charged Carlos with femicide and ordered him to be held in custody pending trial. In the courtroom, Andrea's sisters endured hours of agonizing testimony and evidence. They were heartbroken, confronting the man accused of murdering their youngest sister. Their grief was immense, mixed with fierce anger. During the hearing, one sister revealed a shocking detail. Carlos, the killer, had not only attended Andrea's funeral, but had also helped carry her coffin. He calmly bore the weight of the casket during the burial, walking alongside grieving family members to the cemetery. They viewed it as a sickening act of hypocrisy, a performance to deceive others, avoid suspicion, or perhaps a misguided attempt to deal with his guilt. For Andrea's family, the memory of that moment was agonizing, a stark reminder of the deceit and betrayal surrounding her death. The family's only goal was to get justice for Andrea. During Carlos's trial, the prosecution presented a strong case. They had a lot of evidence, including forensic reports, security camera video, and witness statements. All the evidence showed the same thing. Andrea's death was not an accident. She was killed on purpose. The prosecution requested the maximum sentence of 50 years imprisonment, as permitted by Guatemalan law. They asserted that Carlos planned and executed the crime with extreme violence and continues to pose a threat. The defense lawyer tried to raise reasonable doubt by suggesting a different cause of death for Andrea. Their forensic consultant claimed Andrea might have died from a typical health issue. However, the consultant's claim did not hold up under scrutiny, given the strong evidence against it. The judge found the official forensic report and the timeline established by security footage to be the most convincing evidence. On April 11, 2025, the court found Carlos Monzon guilty of femicide and sentenced him to 25 years in prison. He will not be eligible for parole, bail, or a reduced sentence. Although Andrea's family had wanted a harsher penalty, they felt the verdict was a significant step towards justice. Before being taken into custody, Carlos briefly stated that he was still seeking justice and demanded his release. However, his words seemed insincere, given the overwhelming evidence against him. The sentence brought a mix of emotions to Andrea's family, relief that Carlos was convicted and could not hurt others, but also disappointment that he did not receive the maximum punishment. The conviction, however, served as a tribute to Andrea's memory. Andrea Sanchez, Andrea's sister, publicly thanked the investigators, the courts, and the media for keeping Andrea's story in the public eye. She recognized that public pressure helped prevent the case from being forgotten. Andrea had trusted someone who professed to love her, but he betrayed her in the worst possible way. Because of her family's persistence, strong evidence, and the public's call for justice, her case was not ignored. However, a troubling question remains. How many more women must die before society stops accepting violence that is disguised as love? On May 24, 2013, Fabiana Luzi, a 16-year-old girl from the small town of Corigliano Calabro, Italy, suddenly disappeared, leaving her family in shock and fear. A few days later, the police discovered her body in a remote area, charred and disfigured beyond recognition. The autopsy revealed a truth that shocked the whole of Italy. Fabiana had not only been stabbed more than 20 times, but while still gasping for breath, she had been doused with gasoline and set on fire by her boyfriend, Davide Marone. However, what outraged the public even more was the sentence handed down to the perpetrator of this barbaric crime. Although the act showed signs of being premeditated, Davide was not tried as an adult, but only as a teenager. He received a sentence that was considered too light for the crime that took the life of a young woman, leaving her family with an indelible pain. And since then, a question has haunted Italy. How could a man who stabbed, burned, and murdered a girl receive such a light sentence? How many more lives will be lost before justice is truly on the side of those who died? Fabiana Luzi grew up in a close-knit family in Corigliano Calabro, Italy. She was energetic, active, and strong-willed, traits that became especially clear in her teenage years. She didn't like being bossed around by her parents and started thinking about moving out. This tension led to frequent conflicts, and by 16, Fabiana decided to live on her own. She rented an apartment not far from her family and took a part-time job to support herself. At first, her income wasn't enough, so her parents helped financially. Despite the conflicts at home, Fabiana was a good student. Her parents had high hopes for her. By 2013, she was a 16-year-old high school student who loved dancing and was taking accounting courses, planning a future in that field. She was also in an on and off relationship after she moved out. Her relationship with her parents improved. With fewer daily arguments, things seemed to stabilize, and Fabiana appeared to be managing adult life well. May 24, 2013 began like any other day. No one expected what was to come. Early that morning, Fabiana left for school. She stayed in touch with her parents by phone, as she usually did, to reassure her mother. She planned to stop by her parents' house after lunch. They were expecting her that evening to continue preparing for their summer vacation. But Fabiana never arrived. Her parents, Mario, Luzi, and Rosa, became worried when she didn't answer her phone. At first, they didn't panic. They went to her apartment, but no one answered the door. Despite persistent knocking, the landlord provided a spare key, and they found the place empty. With Fabiana still not responding, they headed to her school to see if she had stayed late. On the way, they ran into Fabiana's classmate and friend. The girls said Fabiana had left right after classes, and they hadn't seen her since. Alarmed, her parents reported her missing to the police. Initially, both the family and the police suspected she might have run away. She had done so about a year earlier, before her parents allowed her to live independently. In early spring 2012, she had gone to Bologna after long-standing conflicts at home. Back then, the police quickly found her. Friends said she was staying with acquaintances, and although they did not know her exact address, she kept in touch with her family, which made the situation easier to resolve. This time, Rosa tried to believe it was another runaway, but two things didn't add up. First, unlike the previous time, Fabiana hadn't contacted anyone, and her phone was switched off. Second, she had no reason to run away. She already lived on her own and was satisfied with her life. The Carabinieri began questioning Fabiana's friends and acquaintances. She had a wide social circle, many of whom her parents had already called. No one knew where she was. However, useful leads emerged. The police went to her school to speak with classmates and teachers who might have noticed something unusual. Friends said Fabiana was anxious that day because she planned to meet her boyfriend. A classmate saw 17-year-old David Moroni meet her near the school after classes. He arrived on his scooter, which he often used to pick her up. After that meeting, no one saw Fabiana again. This meant her boyfriend was the last known person to have contact with her. According to her friends, an argument began as soon as he arrived. Davide accused her of infidelity, which she denied. As the search continued, no solid leads emerged. Police wanted to question Davide, but he didn't answer his phone and wasn't at home. His parents said he had left for school early that morning and hadn't returned. While trying to find him, the detectives gathered information about his troubled relationship with Fabian. Fabiana's friends consistently described a jealous relationship on both sides. They also said Davide had been unfaithful. Fabiana had told them she once caught him kissing another girl, which led to a breakup. After that, they made up. Police interviewed everyone they could, but couldn't immediately reach Davide. He was also a high school senior, 17 years old, in 2013. Fabiana's family and friends said that after the breakup, Davide repeatedly tried to see her and even came to her home. Refusing to accept her refusal, David remained missing for almost a day. Then he turned up at a hospital with severe burns on his face and hands, serious enough to require treatment. His condition drew police attention because the injuries looked like they came from handling flammable substances. When asked how he was burned, he refused to cooperate. Under pressure, he eventually claimed he had been attacked by strangers on the street. He did have injuries on his hands that could be defensive, but they looked more like wounds sustained while someone else was fighting for their life. The source of the burns remained suspicious. Since Davide wouldn't fully explain them, police did not believe his story. He also flatly denied any involvement in Fabiana's disappearance and insisted they hadn't met that day. Even though multiple witnesses confirmed they had, detectives saw many inconsistencies in his account and concluded he was lying. Still, suspicion alone wasn't enough. They needed concrete evidence about what happened to Fabiana. They held off on releasing Davide, and under continued questioning, he began to change his story. First, he admitted he had picked her up after school. Then he claimed he dropped her off at a friend's house and never saw her again. That was quickly disproven. No one in her circle had seen her after classes. Confronted with this lie, Davide changed his account again. He now admitted he picked Fabiana up on his scooter and that they argued near the school. He accused her of seeing someone else. According to him, the argument continued as they rode away. Fabiana sits behind him, denying infidelity and refuting his accusations. They didn't get far. A few kilometers from the school, he stopped in a secluded area. The argument escalated. They shouted until he lost his temper and announced their relationship was over. He said he then jumped on the scooter and drove away, claiming he had no idea what happened to her. After that, the detectives learned from Davide where everything had happened. 2 officers checked the location but found nothing suspicious. Meanwhile, they spoke with Fabiana's relatives, who all said Davide would never let her go. They described him as obsessive and manipulative, someone who stalked her after she tried several times, unsuccessfully, to end the relationship. This supported the Carabinieri's concerns about Davide's behavior, but they needed stronger evidence. On May 25, 2013, a call came into the local station from a man living a few kilometers from the school. While working in a citrus grove, he found signs of a fire and pieces of what looked like women's clothing. It seemed minor at first, but the police had a detailed description of what Fabiana wore the day she disappeared. The burnt fabric matched. The situation grew more serious. Still, there was no body. Investigators avoided premature conclusions and questioned Davide again. He continued to deny everything, insisting he knew nothing. Notably, the location of the fire was near the area he had previously directed police to, suggesting he may have been trying to distract them. Another day passed. Davide spoke with detectives in the presence of a prosecutor and his lawyer. He began to crack. His story had changed several times, and now he said he would tell the truth. He admitted they had a fight that escalated. He claimed Fabiana attacked him and things spiraled out of control. When he stopped, it was too late. He said he started a large fire to destroy evidence and told the police where to find Fabiana's body. The body was found not far from the site of the fire. Fabiana was dead, and her body was badly burned, requiring testing to fully identify her. All materials were sent for examination. She was identified through dental records as 16 years old, Fabiana Luzi. Her family was devastated. She died just weeks before her next birthday. Davide said Fabiana attacked first, and he lost control. He claimed he carried a knife for everyday tasks and used it to stab her. Although he called it self-defense, the more than 20 stab wounds on Fabiana's body could not support this claim, especially since Davide only suffered minor injuries. Interrogations continued. Despite his lies, Davide was the only source for details about Fabiana's death, and investigators pressed on. He then said Fabiana fell to the ground and stopped moving, and that he set the body on fire to hide the crime. That was false. Forensic analysis showed Fabiana was alive when she was set on fire. Her lungs were full of smoke. She burned alive. The Carabinieri suspected Davide was still minimizing his guilt. Eventually, Davide admitted Fabiana was alive when he doused her with gasoline and lit the fire. He saw her breathing and trying to get up, and he stopped her. According to the forensic expert, although she suffered more than 20 stab wounds, none struck vital organs or major arteries, she could have died from blood loss, but only after a long time, and she might have survived with timely medical help. That was not what David intended. These findings supported the conclusion that the crime was premeditated. Numerous witnesses had described ongoing tension between Fabiana and Davide. Shortly before Fabiana's death, their relationship had reached one of its most turbulent phases. Her best friend said that she had broken up with David and was trying to get her life together. She likely had started seeing someone else. For a haunted young man like David, this could have been a powerful motivation to commit a crime. Detectives were struck by how cold-blooded Davide seemed. He appeared emotionless and kept resisting, forcing investigators to extract every word. It took the Carabinieri 2 days of questioning to get the most plausible account. According to Davide, he met Fabiana that day after she finished her classes. He wanted to talk about their relationship again, but she insisted it was over. David refused to accept her decision, believing she simply wanted more attention from him. He chased after her and tried to court her, but he was wrong. She was firm and did not want to reconcile. In the heat of the argument, Fabiana said she already had a new boyfriend and would not get back together. That comment sealed her fate. In a jaloux rage, Davide grabbed a knife and stabbed her more than 20 times. It happened in a deserted area on the outskirts of the city. There was no one to intervene, and he did not stop. Even after Fabiana fell to the ground bleeding, she was still alive. Davide still did not call for help. Instead, he went to his scooter, took a small gasoline canister, and poured it over her while she was still alive. He then set her on fire. Fabiana continued to struggle, but she could no longer save herself. The heartbreaking case drew intense public and media attention. Fabiana's family could not accept that their daughter's life ended so tragically. Everyone remembered Fabiana as a cheerful, active girl who had recently been seeking freedom and independence, perhaps a factor that contributed to her death. After moving out and living independently, she rarely shared her relationship with her parents, mainly confiding in her friends. As a result, her parents could not fully grasp the danger. Fabiana's close friends described her relationship with David as unhealthy. She quickly became disillusioned with him. He was obsessive, extremely jealous, and often provoked conflicts, sometimes just because a boy on the street said hello to her. The situation was difficult to control, especially since she was still in school. Relatives heard about the breakup but did not realize he was acting like a stalker, and that the two had resumed seeing each other. Tensions escalated. During the breakup, Fabiana complained to friends about him and wanted to report him to the police, hoping that would stop him from haunting her further. His behavior was frightening. For reasons unclear, his parents did not seem concerned about their son's condition. Many witnesses described Davide as aggressive, antisocial, and strange. He struggled to make new friends and showed signs of cruelty, which his family appeared to dismiss with a peculiar indifference. He had long been a troubled young man with possessive tendencies. An ex-girlfriend had warned others about him. She needed help from adults to scare him off, and only then did he leave her alone. Fabiana, however, wanted to handle the situation herself. Davide also had a difficult personal history and behavioral problems from an early age. These issues worsened amid domestic violence after his parents divorced. His first stepfather was an alcoholic who drank daily and often started fights, beating Davide and his mother. Although they separated from him quickly, the damage was done. Perhaps this contributed to Davide's cruelty. He could not let Fabiana go when she tried to free herself from his control. Based on this, detectives believe David was still hiding the full truth. The circumstances suggested he had lured her to the deserted area with the intention to kill. The gasoline canister strongly indicated premeditation. Davide did not typically carry extra fuel. He rarely rode his scooter outside the city, and its fuel efficiency meant a full tank was usually sufficient. Most disturbing was the brutality he inflicted on Fabiana, a fragile young woman. Her friends were convinced she would never have willingly followed her boyfriend to such an isolated place. She would have sensed immediately that something was wrong. Fabiana's funeral was held on May 28, 2013, at the town hall, where about 5,000 people gathered to pay their respects. Local TV channels and newspapers closely covered the event. The tragedy reignited public debate about femicide and the vulnerability of girls in relationships with manipulative partners. During the ceremony, Fabiana's family and friends spoke, as did the leader of her religious community. They offered support to the family and expressed hope that the perpetrator would be punished to the fullest extent of the law. Many people once again asked how to prevent the recurring violence that claims young lives. Meanwhile, Davide Moroni was arrested. He confessed and is awaiting trial in prison. Fabiana's relatives demanded he be tried as an adult, citing the crime's cruelty, planning, and attempts to conceal evidence. Although prosecutors advocated trying David as an adult, the judge ruled that he would be tried as a juvenile. His mental health became a point of contention. Witnesses, including his ex-girlfriend, described troubling behavior, prompting evaluations. However, experts found no condition that would justify legal limitations on responsibility. Declared mentally competent, Davide stood trial. Because he confessed, the proceedings were expedited. Fabiana's family attended every stage, determined to see justice served. He was found guilty and initially sentenced to 22 years in prison. Davide appealed, arguing procedural errors in the mental health evaluation and seeking a reduced sentence. An independent expert hired by the defense later concluded he was only partially competent. As a result, the appeals court reduced his sentence to 18 years and removed premeditation as an aggravating factor, allowing further appeals to proceed. There remained a risk his sentence could be reduced even more. Since Davide was a minor at the time of the crime, Fabiana's family could not join the criminal case as a civil party, but they continued to push for a harsher outcome, believing the sentence was too lenient. In 2015, the court ordered Davide's parents to pay €300,000 in compensation to Fabiana's family. The defense disputed this, but the family's lawyer argued that Davide's parents shared responsibility for his upbringing. The court agreed, finding that they failed to provide adequate supervision, including medical care and access to full education. The judge noted they did not monitor him sufficiently and missed the period when his mental health issues began. No records showed psychiatric consultations or appropriate treatment for David, a lack of care that the court concluded contributed to the tragedy. Mario Luzi, Fabiana's father, expressed strong indignation towards the Ministry of Justice and even appealed directly to the president. His anger stemmed from the fact that Davide Moroni received concessions while in prison. Davide reportedly behaved well, avoided conflicts, and actively participated in a rehabilitation program. Because of this, he was periodically allowed temporary release, Fabiana's family condemned the decision as absurd, arguing that the laws protect perpetrators rather than victims. Mario wrote extensively about the pain of losing his daughter, saying that such leniency toward her killer only deepens their suffering. Fabiana's family has kept her memory alive. Since 2013, they have held a vigil every May 24 and organized awareness campaigns to share her story. Aligning these efforts with initiatives against gender-based violence, their work has drawn attention from organizations addressing similar issues at broader levels. In 2025, for the 12th anniversary of Fabiana's death, the Anti-Violence Center hosted the commemoration. The organization offers legal and psychological support to women in abusive or dangerous relationships. The events took place in a municipal suburban park in a square dedicated to Fabiana Luzi, which has become a symbolic site. Despite these efforts, the family believes that the legislation remains excessively lenient. The candle had barely burned when the wax had already left its mark on cold skin. Beside the bed, 2 knives were still stained with blood. In a small apartment in Las Vegas, the body of Herleene Doulai lay motionless after a night of so-called purification rituals. For those who knew Herleene, a passionate fitness trainer, a warm and inspiring woman, her death was not only brutal, but also hauntingly unbelievable. Having come to Las Vegas to start her life over, Herleene embarked on a journey to find spiritual balance, but the place she hoped to find enlightenment turned into a pit of tragedy, and the person who accompanied her on that journey, Ash Armand, a former star of the show Gigolos, was the one who dragged her into a spiral of death. Herleene Doulai was born in 1991 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. She grew up in a close-knit family, surrounded by supportive parents and siblings. Naturally outgoing and warm, she easily connected with people. Friends and colleagues admired her for her empathy, encouragement, and ability to inspire positivity in others. From childhood, Herleene was curious and eager to explore many interests, but her deepest passion was science and health. She pursued biology in college, envisioning a career in medicine or research. Yet, after graduating, she realized that life behind a desk or in a lab was not the future she wanted. That realization pushed her to make a bold change, relocating to Las Vegas, a city known for its energy, opportunity, and relentless pace. For Herleene, Vegas was more than just a move. It was a reinvention. Shortly after arriving, she immersed herself in fitness. Within months, she had transformed not only her body, but also her confidence. That personal journey sparked a calling. She became a certified personal trainer, determined to help others unlock their potential. Her career flourished quickly. Clients valued her encouragement, guidance, and unwavering support. To them, she wasn't just designing workouts. She was a motivator, a confidante, and a partner in transformation. Colleagues admired her energy, her optimism, and her unique ability to find common ground with anyone she met. But beneath the bright surface, Herleene wrestled with deeper questions. After the move, she often pondered life's purpose, searching for meaning beyond her daily routines. This led her to explore spiritual practices and alternative healing. She became fascinated by meditation, energy work, philosophical ideas about inner balance, and higher states of awareness. The more she delved into these realms, the more drawn she became to the notion of transcending ordinary reality. Through this new path, she found herself in a different social circle. Among those she met was a man who shared her hunger for deeper knowledge. Their conversations revolved around spirituality, energy, and uncovering hidden truths. At first, The exchanges felt inspiring, but over time, they began to take a darker turn. Ash Armand, birth name is Akshaya Kubiak, had a magnetic charisma, confident and articulate. He could adapt to any conversation, making those around him feel seen and understood, always the center of attention. He projected the aura of someone who had glimpsed higher truths. He often spoke about consciousness, energy, and existence, eager to share his beliefs with anyone willing to listen. Herleene was captivated by his worldview. She felt that he understood her yearning and that with him, she might unlock something greater. Their talks quickly evolved into a deeper connection. Together, they explored practices meant to quiet the mind, dismantle inner barriers, and reject social constraints they believed held them back. In time, however, his ideas grew more radical. He argued that traditional self-improvement was shallow, claiming that true enlightenment required abandoning fear, breaking mental chains, and venturing into altered states of perception. He insisted that real awareness lay beyond the boundaries of ordinary experience. That was when their retreats began. They ventured to remote spots outside the city, places where they could disconnect from the outside world. There, Herleene experimented with new methods of self-discovery. Gradually, these practices took a more dangerous turn. Psychoactive substances entered the picture, presented as keys to higher consciousness, tools to break free from ordinary reality. Under their influence, she slipped into altered states, convinced she was glimpsing profound truths. Each experience felt like a journey into deeper understanding, yet the line between clarity and illusion grew thinner. Perception became unstable, reality uncertain. These journeys were intoxicating, but they slowly pulled her further away from the life she once knew. At some point, her search for harmony shifted into something far more perilous. She may not have realized how far she had drifted, but step by step, she was being drawn into a world she could not easily escape. By then, the path back to the life she had built seemed impossibly out of reach. Herleene and Ash grew close quickly, their bond intensifying in a way that felt almost fated. In the early days, their connection seemed effortless, filled with conversations about spirituality, self-discovery, and the search for higher meaning. Yet as time passed, small cracks began to appear, warning signs that at first seemed too minor to matter. Ash could be affectionate and attentive, speaking with warmth and insight, but then, without warning, he would grow cold and unapproachable. His moods shifted like quicksilver. Sometimes he spoke with dazzling conviction, as if unveiling the universe's deepest secrets. At other times, he snapped at the smallest things, retreating into silence for hours, even days. There were occasions when he vanished altogether, ignoring Herlene's calls and messages, only to resurface, claiming he had needed time alone to cleanse his spirit and release the energies he had absorbed from others. Herleene wanted to understand him, but these erratic disappearances left her increasingly uneasy. The more time they spent together, the more Ash pressed her to abandon the beliefs and frameworks she had once relied on. He claimed logic was a trap, that true growth could only be achieved by silencing reason and embracing pure intuition. His words grew steadily stranger. He spoke of shadowy forces, of people infected with dark energy that held humanity back from evolution. Most troubling of all was his fixation on Herleene herself. He insisted there was something inside her that needed to be purged, an imbalance in her energy field that blocked her from achieving enlightenment. According to him, she could only reach her full potential if she trusted him completely and allowed him to guide the process of cleansing. By the summer of 2020, his behavior had become increasingly erratic. Some days, he claimed to see visions of her future or to read her private thoughts with ease. Other days, he was consumed by suspicion, demanding that she trust only him and no one else. At times, he was an inspiring mentor, radiating confidence, while at other times he was volatile, irritable, and withdrawn. What unsettled Herleene most, however, was his growing obsession with rituals. He described ancient ceremonies that, he said, had the power to strip away all inner barriers. Only by participating in these rituals, he insisted, could a person truly free themselves from illusions and embrace reality. At first, Herleene dismissed this as another one of his philosophical digressions, but soon, the pressure mounted. He began urging her to take part, telling her that only absolute trust in him could allow her to transcend her limits. Gradually, she realized these conversations were no longer abstract. His strange beliefs weren't confined to talk, they had begun to shape his every action, and by extension, their relationship. He demanded not just her attention, but her obedience. He expected her to surrender completely, body, mind, and spirit, to his methods and his worldview. On the evening of July 15, 2020, Herleene was with Ash at his apartment in Las Vegas. That night was supposed to be dedicated to what he called a spiritual cleansing session. He told her the time had finally come to cast aside all boundaries, to achieve the higher state of consciousness they had long spoken of. To prepare, he insisted that she take a powerful dose of psychoactive substances only under their influence. He claimed, could she achieve true clarity and connection with the hidden dimensions of existence? Herleene hesitated. A wave of unease swept over her. Every instinct told her to refuse, but Ash's pressure was relentless. Against her better judgment, she gave in. This was not the first time she had experimented under his guidance, but there was something different about this night. The dose was larger, more dangerous, more extreme. Within minutes, the effects overtook her. The world began to unravel. Objects blurred and dissolved into shifting shapes, sounds grew distorted, vibrating with unnatural intensity. Her perception collapsed into chaos as the drug surged through her body. Ash, by contrast, seemed exhilarated. His words tumbled out in a frantic, rapid stream. He declared that his mind had broken free of its limits, that he could see beyond the physical world into some higher plane of truth. His eyes burned with a manic light, his voice rising with fevered intensity. But for Herleene, the experience was terrifying. Her visions did not bring peace or understanding. They brought panic. Anxiety gripped her chest. Her body trembled, and her mind spun into a vortex of fear. She tried desperately to ground herself, to fight her way back to stability, but her body would not obey. The night that began as a promise of enlightenment was descending into something darker, something from which there would be no return. Ash's behavior grew more unstable with each passing hour. At one point, he turned to Herleene with a piercing gaze, his voice low but edged with menace. He said he sensed something unnatural about her, insisting that she was engulfed in dark energy that needed to be cleansed. When she tried to object, his agitation only escalated. He accused her of resisting, of blocking the release of negative energy. His words tumbled out faster, sharper, more threatening. With every sentence, his obsession deepened, and the atmosphere in the room thickened with dread. Herleene attempted to calm him, but his mind was no longer reachable. The stimulant had clouded his judgment, and he was consumed by the belief that he needed to act immediately. In a sudden burst of aggression, Ash seized her wrist. She tried to pull away, but his grip, fueled by adrenaline and frenzy, was overpowering. With a violent shove, he sent her crashing to the floor. The assault escalated with terrifying speed. Violence seemed to surge through him in waves. Grabbing a heavy glass candlestick from a nearby table, He struck her again and again. Her head dropped limp, her body trembling in convulsions. Yet he didn't stop. In a horrifying frenzy, he reached for knives and other objects, inflicting savage wounds. Only when Herlene's breathing ceased, when the spark of life had completely left her body, did the rampage end. A chilling silence fell over the Las Vegas apartment. Ash stood frozen, his stimulant-fueled mania slowly giving way to a grim awareness of what had just unfolded. Blood was everywhere. On the floor, on his clothes, staining his hands. The stench of death was thick in the air. For hours he lingered in that apartment, pacing, staring at her body, as if searching for a way to undo what had already been done. But there was no undoing it. On the morning of July 16, 2020, a call was made to emergency services. The man on the line, Ash Armand, spoke with an uneven tone. There was tension in his voice, but not the panic one would expect from someone who had just witnessed a tragedy. He told the dispatcher that his partner was dead, claiming it had been an accident and that he had tried to help her. But it was too late. Police arrived within minutes. Ash himself answered the door. His appearance stunned them. His clothes were stained with blood, his expression weary, detached. He showed no visible signs of panic or despair, only a cold exhaustion. Inside, the scene was one of chaos and violence. On the floor lay the lifeless body of Herleene Doulai, her skin pale, her face and neck marred by dark bruises. Her arms bore deep scratches, surrounded by smears of dried blood. The disarray of the room left little doubt. A brutal struggle had taken place, but the bathroom told a different story. It was eerily clean, almost scrubbed. Investigators noticed faint smudges of blood on the tiles, but most surfaces had been wiped. In the washing machine, they discovered clothing stained with blood. Ash's own outfit appeared to have been recently laundered, suggesting a hurried attempt to conceal evidence. 2 unlit candles stood by the bed. Disturbingly, investigators found traces of melted wax on Herlene's skin, an inexplicable and chilling detail. On the bedside table lay 2 knives, one a kitchen blade, the other a folding knife, both still caked with dried blood. It is clear that someone tried to erase the truth but failed. Officers also uncovered a suitcase packed with personal items, cash, and documents. The discovery suggested Ash had intended to flee, but had either changed his mind or run out of time. When questioned, his statements were erratic and contradictory. At times, he claimed he remembered nothing. Moments later, he insisted Herleene had attacked him first and that he was only defending himself. However, his body had no scratches or injuries. Nothing to corroborate the story of his struggle. The police kept a close eye on Ash's behavior. He showed no visible emotion, asked for no help, and never expressed genuine shock at what had taken place. Meanwhile, forensic experts continued combing through the crime scene. In the refrigerator, they discovered several bottles of alcohol. On the table, they found traces of a powdery substance, later confirmed to be a banned substance. Step by step, the picture began to form. Someone had clearly tried to destroy evidence, but the attempt was careless and incomplete. Everything pointed to the crime having been committed under the influence of psychoactive substances. While investigators documented the evidence, Ash was placed in the back of a patrol car. He didn't resist or protest. The investigation was still in its early stages, yet authorities already had little doubt. His version of events, centered on self-defense, simply didn't stand up to scrutiny. Detectives immediately began to dig into Ash Armand's past. The inquiry soon uncovered striking details of his biography. Ash's real name was Akshaya Kubiak. He was born in 1981 in India and spent his early years moving between Japan and the United States. From a young age, his parents introduced him to meditation, alternative medicine, and spiritual practices. As a teenager, he immersed himself in Eastern philosophy, became fascinated with esoteric teachings, trained in massage and energy healing techniques. The turning point in his life came in 2011, when he caught the attention of Gareth James, the owner of a luxury escort agency. Ash's striking looks and confident demeanor made him a natural fit for the world of high-end companionship. This led him to Las Vegas, where he was quickly swept into a lifestyle of wealthy clients, lavish parties, and easy money. By 2012, he was invited to join the reality TV show Gigolos, which gave him both national exposure and financial success. But with fame came pressure, the constant public attention, rivalry among castmates, and the demands of the escort industry began to weigh heavily on him. To maintain his image as a desirable, larger-than-life figure, Ash turned to steroids to enhance his physique. Eventually, he escalated to harder substances. His dependence on external validation soon mixed with a growing addiction to banned substance. As the years went by, his behavior grew increasingly unstable. He was involved in bar fights, had several altercations in Las Vegas nightclubs, and was arrested for driving under the influence. When Gigolos ended in 2016, his popularity faded rapidly. Income streams dried up, and his attempts to stay relevant in the media world failed. The fortune he had made during his years of fame was quickly squandered on luxury cars, wild parties, and an indulgent lifestyle. By 2020, his life was a shadow of what it once was. Once a recognized TV personality, he was now renting a modest apartment and scraping together income by meeting fans of the show who were willing to pay for his company. When he met Herleene Doulai, he was already spiraling. In his desperation, he turned once more to spiritual practices and mysticism, convincing himself that he had the ability to manipulate energy and bend reality. But under the grip of banned substance, these ideas twisted into dangerous delusions. His relationship with Herleene became less about love and more about control. To him, she was not only a partner, but someone he could dominate and mold. Over time, his conviction hardened into obsession. He believed he could not only influence her thoughts, but dictate her destiny. That July night, with his mind corroded by years of substance abuse and self-deception, the fragile balance finally shattered. Investigators assembled the puzzle of his life piece by piece, and the deeper they looked, the clearer it became. This was no random crime. Ash had been on a collision course with tragedy for years. His trial began in 2021. Prosecutors charged Ash Armand with murder, arguing that Herleene Doulai was the victim of a savage, deliberate attack, and that self-defense was incompatible with the evidence. The defense, in turn, leaned on claims of temporary insanity. Ash's lawyers argued that he had lost control of his actions due to banned substance and an emotional breakdown, insisting that he never intended to kill her. In court, Ash himself maintained that he loved Herleene and would never have deliberately harmed her. Public reaction was sharply divided. Many, upon learning the disturbing details of the case, condemned the sheer brutality of the crime and demanded the harshest punishment possible. Yet, a portion of Ash's fans from the Gigolos reality show continued to stand by him. They insisted he was a victim of circumstance rather than a cold-blooded killer. Supporters voiced their opinions on social media, and some even organized fundraising groups to help finance his legal defense. Herlene's family, meanwhile, fought relentlessly for justice. Her parents and sisters gave emotional interviews describing her as a vibrant, compassionate woman whose life had been stolen by a man who exploited her trust. They emphasized that no argument, whether about banned substance, stress, or mental health, could erase the cruelty of his actions or diminish his responsibility. In December 2021, The court delivered its verdict. Ash Armand was found guilty of the voluntary manslaughter of Herleene Doulai and sentenced to 20 years in prison. Under state law, he would be eligible for parole after serving 8 years. For Herlene's loved ones, the ruling was bittersweet. They expressed deep disappointment, calling the punishment far too lenient given the horror of the crime. The court, however, had considered the defense's arguments regarding Ash's impaired mental state at the time of the killing, and this factor influenced the final sentence. According to the judgment, Ash will remain incarcerated until 2041, although he could potentially be released as early as 2029 if granted parole. Whether or not parole will ever be approved remains uncertain, a question that continues to haunt Herlene's family.